Paranormal M viewers. The weather's been so overcast and gloomy lately, and I've really been looking forward to sitting down at the mic and sharing mysterious experiences from around the world with you. By the way, thank you so much for sending in so many of your own stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now, let's all get into bed, put on our headphones, and dive into today's mysterious experiences. So, when I was a kid, I could not sleep in my own room. I wish I could tell you exactly why, but it was more like this heavy, unshakable fear that would settle over me the second the lights went out. Some nights, I'd just lie there staring at the ceiling, heart racing, convinced something was wrong even when everything looked normal. It got so bad that by the time I was in middle school, I finally switched bedrooms. But before I moved, there's one moment that stayed with me so clearly, like it's stamped into my memory. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing someone standing in my doorway. Just a silhouette at first. A really tall man, broad shoulders, the kind of shape that fills up the frame of a door. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe right. My brain kept trying to make it make sense, like maybe it was my dad checking on me. Maybe it was my eyes playing tricks because I'd just woken up. So I reached for my lamp and turned it on, thinking, okay, light will fix this. It'll disappear. But it didn't. He was still there. And I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you, lamp on, room lit, and that shape was still standing right in my doorway like it belonged there. I remember looking away and looking back over and over, like some desperate little ritual. Please be gone. Please be gone. And then, after what felt like forever, but was probably less than a minute, he just wasn't there anymore. No footsteps, no door creak, no explanation, just gone. After that, I switched rooms, and I never saw him again. Now, growing up, there were other little things that happened in our house. Nothing as intense as that, but enough that it became this running joke in my family. Like the TV turning on by itself all the time, or the radio crackling to life when nobody touched it. One time, my old music player started playing like it had a mind of its own, and my family was just like, "Oh, that's the ghost again. Must be bored." It sounds funny when you say it like that, but when you're the kid who already feels uneasy, it doesn't feel like a joke. It feels like you're sharing space with something you can't see. Fast forward, now I'm 22, still living at home, and one morning my dad tells me, completely straight-faced, that he thinks he heard a ghost. And this is what got me, because my dad is not the type. He's the last person to blame something on the paranormal. If anything, he's usually the person who rolls his eyes when anyone mentions it. But he told me he woke up in the night and heard someone moving around in his bathroom. Slow footsteps, like someone pacing. Then he heard the sink turn on, and off, and on again. He assumed it was my mom, but she was asleep right next to him. So then he thought maybe it was me or my brother, which didn't make sense, but he got up anyway. He checked both our rooms. We were both dead asleep. He couldn't explain it, and he told me because he remembered how, as a kid, I always swore there was something in the house. Then, a few months later, my family went out of town for a weekend, and two of my closest friends stayed at our house to keep my cat company. Everything seemed fine until I got this text from my friend. Let's call her Maddie. And she just goes, "Okay, please don't freak out, but I think I saw someone." My stomach dropped immediately. She said she saw a tall, shadowy figure, like a man, moving from the kitchen toward the dining room. Not a quick blur, not like a reflection, but like an actual person walking through the house. And without really thinking, I said, "Broad shoulders." There was this pause on the phone where everything went quiet, and then she goes, "Yes, that's exactly it." So I told her the story I almost never tell, about the night I woke up and saw the tall man in my doorway. And the second I described him, she got really quiet and then started freaking out, because she said it sounded like the exact same figure she'd seen. A tall man, broad shoulders, just a silhouette. And I'll be honest, that's the part that still messes with me. Because maybe my childhood fear was just fear. Maybe the doorway thing was a weird, half-awake moment. Maybe the electronics were coincidences. Maybe my dad heard pipes. Maybe my friends saw shadows in an unfamiliar house. But when the descriptions start matching, when it's not just me anymore, it makes it harder to shrug off. So I don't know. I'm not even saying, yes, my house is haunted. I just know what I saw. I know what my dad heard. And I know my friend described something I never told her about until after she saw it. And sometimes I catch myself thinking, if it really is something, maybe it's been there all along. Quiet, occasional, just present enough to remind us it's still around. Anyway, that's my story. I'm curious what you think, because I still don't have an explanation that feels solid. Alright, so I've had a lot of strange experiences over the years. Family visiting in ways they shouldn't, creepy places, nightmares that felt way too real. But there are two moments that still sit with me. Even now, if I think about them for too long, I get that little cold ripple in my chest. The first one happened when I was little. My dad, dad at the time, the way you think of him as a kid, he bought this old house at auction in Hadley, Essex. Essex already has that reputation, doesn't it? Like the air there remembers things. Anyway, the house had this tiny box room at the end of the upstairs landing, and because I was the smallest, Dad decided it would be my room. I hated it instantly. It was always darker than it should have been. Even with the door open, because I always had it open, it still felt like the light just didn't want to go in there. And it was cold. Not old house cold. More like the room was holding its breath. At night, it got worse. I had one of those loft beds with the desk and wardrobe underneath, and every time I stayed at my dad's, I'd climb up and force myself to sleep facing the wall. I wouldn't face the ladder. I wouldn't face the room. Because something in me was convinced that if I looked out into the dark, I'd see something I couldn't unsee. And then there was the sound. Almost every night I was there, I'd hear this slow, squeaky noise in the hallway, like an old wheelchair or a cart with one bad wheel, coming closer, inch by inch, right toward my door. Not rushing, not stopping, just that steady like it had done it 1,000 times before. I used to freeze under the blanket, barely breathing, listening to it reach my door. I'd tell my dad in the morning, and he'd shrug it off. Pipes, he'd say. Old house noises. You know the kind of dismissal adults give when they don't want to add anything scary to a child's brain. But I wasn't imagining it. I know I wasn't. Eventually, when I got older, I managed to move out of that room. It got handed to my stepsister. Her name was Leanne, and she hated it too. She lasted, a couple of weeks? She said it felt wrong, like she was being watched, and she ended up moving into her sister's room. Then it became my little brother's room when he was a toddler, and that was the part that really confirmed it for me. For nearly a year, my dad and stepmom couldn't keep him in there through the night. He refused. He'd cry, cling, beg. And if they did get him to sleep in there, he'd wake up screaming and bolt out. They ended up leaving the door wide open with the hallway light blazing, or his lamp on low like a night watchman. It's funny, years later my dad renovated the place. That whole area got changed because he converted the loft, and now the stairs go up where that room used to be. The box room isn't even really a room anymore, but when you stand on that landing, you still look toward where it was. You can't help it. And Dad still tries to explain it away. Northwest facing, he'll say. Doesn't get much light, so it feels colder. And I always say, my room at Mom's is northwest too. It's never felt like that room, because it wasn't about sunlight, it was about presence. Now the second experience, this one happened when I was a teenager at my mom's old house. And I'm not kidding when I say it's the only time I've ever actually cried during something paranormal. I was that scared. Then I heard it. A key in the front door. That very specific sound. Metal scraping, then the little click, then the door opening and closing. Like someone had come home. So I called out, casual, not worried at all. "Hi." No answer. And then I heard footsteps on the stairs, coming up. At the time, it wouldn't have been unusual for my mom to come in and head upstairs first before saying much, so I just glanced toward the door, expecting her to appear. But it wasn't her. A woman leaned around the edge of the door frame and looked in at me, just her face at first, then a bit more. She smiled like she was checking on me, like she was fond of me, like she belonged there. She had this calm, gentle expression, soft eyes, familiar somehow. She didn't speak, she just smiled, and then slowly, very slowly, backed away. And I watched her go. Then I heard her footsteps turn and go back down the stairs. I heard the front door open again, close, and the lock click. And that's when my brain finally caught up to what my eyes had already seen. Because the woman looked like my Nan, the Nan who died years before I was even born. My whole body went cold in a rush. I didn't even think, I just ran. I flew down the stairs and grabbed the front door handle. Locked. I checked every room downstairs like a maniac. Kitchen, front room, back room. Nothing. No one. The house was empty. I remember my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone when I snatched up the landline. I called my aunt's house, and when my mom answered, I was already crying, words tumbling out of me. "Mom, Nan was here. I saw Nan. She was here. Please come home, please." And my mom was like, "What do you mean you saw Nan?" So I told her again. I kept repeating it because I didn't know what else to do. I needed her to understand that I wasn't joking, that I wasn't confused, that I'd seen someone. Mom came back fast. Honestly, it felt like minutes. She burst through the door and practically ran into the living room where I was waiting like a trapped animal. And she just wrapped her arms around me. She kept saying, "It's okay, it's okay." And then she tried to make it rational, because that's what moms do. She said something like, "It was just Mom, just your Nan, coming to check you're all right. You don't need to be scared." But that didn't make it better, because the thought that someone who's gone could still walk into the house like that, use a key, climb the stairs, look in on me, like the boundary between here and not here was just a door you could open. That terrified me. Even now, I can see her smile in my mind if I let myself. And the strange thing is, normally I brush paranormal stuff off in the moment. You learn to, especially around Essex. You get this instinct like, not dealing with that right now, and you carry on and unpack it later. But that time, I couldn't. I cried. I shook. I felt small. And ever since then, I've wondered, what's the most memorable thing other people have experienced? Like, what's the one moment they can't explain away, even if they try? So, I'm pretty new to thrifting, and honestly, I get why people love it. It's fun, it's cheap, and it makes decorating your home feel like a little treasure hunt. And I'm hoping I'm among friends when I say this part out loud. I've had experiences for years that feel spiritual, energy related, whatever you want to call it. Prophetic dreams that come true later. That weird, gentle pressure on the mattress like a cat just hopped up and patted across the bed, even when there's no cat. Random knocking sounds that don't have a clear source. And sometimes I'll walk into a place and just know there's something there. Not in a scary way, just in a, hello, I'm not alone kind of way. And yes, I know, people have explanations for everything. Sleep stuff, stress stuff, that whole exploding head syndrome thing. I'm not here to argue it. If you don't believe in any of this, that's totally fine. But you probably wouldn't be listening to this anyway. Okay, so here's what happened. A little while ago, the strange stuff started picking up again. More vivid dreams. More of that cat walking on the bed feeling. A stronger sense that something wanted my attention. Not malicious, never threatening, but persistent. Like someone hovering at the edge of a conversation waiting for you to look up. At first, I blamed it on the house. We'd heard that the previous owner, an older man named Harold, had passed not long before. And everyone in the neighborhood talked about how deeply connected he was to this place. Like the house wasn't just where he lived, it was part of him. And the timing lined up almost perfectly with when I started noticing the activity. So I did what I always do when the vibe starts getting too crowded. I cleansed the space. I used rosemary and incense instead of sage this time. Just a gentler reset. And for about a week or two, it actually felt better. Lighter. Calmer. Like the house could finally exhale. But then, it crept back in. Not the knocking as much this time, but definitely the bed sensation. And that same, I need you to notice me, feeling. Like a tap on the shoulder you can't see. And one night, I'm lying there staring at my bedroom wall, and it hits me like a sudden, stupidly obvious puzzle piece sliding into place. Because around the same time all this started ramping up, I'd brought home a thrifted piece of art. It wasn't even creepy. It was just this vintage framed print, kind of dreamy, muted colors. The sort of thing you hang up and think, oh wow, this makes the room feel grown up. And I'd hung it directly across from my bed, so it was basically the last thing I looked at before I fell asleep. And in that moment, I was like, oh no. So the next day, I took it down. I didn't smash it or burn it or do anything dramatic. I just wrapped it carefully, put it in the car, and dropped it off for donation. Quietly, respectfully, like, this isn't for me. Someone else will love you. And I'm telling you, the relief was almost immediate. That night? Nothing. No shifting on the mattress. No prickly awareness. No feeling of someone standing just out of sight waiting for me to acknowledge them. It's been calm ever since. Like the whole house settled back into its normal rhythm. And look, maybe it's coincidence. Maybe my brain connected dots that didn't exist. But all I know is, the second that artwork left my home, whatever had been trying to get my attention seemed to leave with it. Which definitely made me rethink the whole thrifting is harmless thing. Because now, when I bring something secondhand into my space, I don't just ask, does this match my decor? I also ask, what are you bringing with you? So, let me tell you about something that happened to me recently. I'm still not sure what I believe about it, but I remember every second like it's stamped into my skin. I'm a disabled person from South Asia, and my life has been uneven. My income comes and goes, and so does my housing. I move between shelters, women's hostels, and these places we call PGs, paying guest accommodations. It's basically renting a bed or a room in someone's home. You live with the family, you pay for the basics, and sometimes they even include meals. It's not fancy, but it's something. Right now, I'm staying in a 2-story house with a family of 5, the parents, their 3 kids, and the grandmother, the wife's mother. I stay upstairs on the top floor, and I get around with a walking stick. The kids' rooms are up here too, so usually this floor is full of footsteps and noise and life. But that day, everyone left. In the morning, the landlord's wife and the grandmother went to the hospital for a minor procedure. Nothing dramatic, just something planned. The landlord took the kids out for a movie. They said they'd be gone until evening, which meant I was alone in the house for hours. And listen, I like being alone sometimes. Solitude can be a relief. But this wasn't peaceful quiet. It was the kind of silence that feels wrong. Like the house is holding its breath. Like something is listening back. I tried to ignore it. I sat with my laptop, checking job listings, refreshing emails, doing those small, boring tasks you do when you're trying to keep your life together one click at a time. Then I heard it. A voice, right outside my room, calling, "Mole." That word, elders use it like "dear girl" or "daughter." And the voice was unmistakable. It sounded like the grandmother. Warm, familiar, a little raspy. The exact voice I'd heard 100 times downstairs. My first thought was simple. Oh, they must be back from the hospital. It would have been unusual for her to come upstairs because her knee is bad. Honestly, her mobility is as rough as mine, maybe worse, but it wasn't impossible. I figured maybe she didn't know the kids had gone out and she was looking for them. Or maybe she needed something. So I got up, slowly, carefully. I leaned on my walking stick and opened my door. And there was no one. The hallway was empty. No footsteps fading away. No rustle of a sari. Nothing. The house was still. Still in that unnatural way that makes your stomach tighten. For a moment, I just stood there, confused, holding my breath like maybe I'd see her turn the corner. But there was nowhere for her to have gone without me hearing it. She couldn't have gone back downstairs that fast. I told myself, okay, maybe I imagined it. I'm tired. I'm stressed. The silence is playing tricks. Then I heard it again. Mole. This time, it wasn't in front of me. It was to my left, toward the utility area, the little space with the washing machine that opens out onto the terrace. My heart did that horrible thing where it drops too fast. I'm speech impaired, so calling out is hard for me, but I tried anyway. Just a strained, worried sound like, "Hello? Are you there?" Because my mind instantly went to the most logical fear. What if she fell? What if she tried to come up and collapsed near the terrace? And out of pure habit, before I moved, I closed my bedroom door behind me. I keep thinking about that part. I don't know why. It just feels important. No one was there. Nothing. No movement. No shadow. No sign of any person. And then, a loud crash came from downstairs. Not a small sound, not a creak or a bump. A heavy, sharp impact, like something dropped hard enough to shake the air. I froze for 1 second, and then I panicked. I turned around, went back to my room as quickly as my body would let me, locked the door, and messaged the landlord's wife immediately. My hands were actually shaking while I typed. I asked if they'd returned. I told her I'd heard the grandmother call me. I told her something crashed downstairs. She replied pretty quickly. They were still at the hospital, nowhere near home, not coming back until evening, and she added, like a reassurance, that the house had been locked when they left. So, if the house was locked, and they weren't home, then who called me? And what fell downstairs? I sat there staring at my door like it was the only thing separating me from something that had learned my language. I did this quick protection visualization, just something simple I've taught myself for when fear gets too loud. Nothing fancy, just imagining light around me, around the room, around the lock. And I made a decision. I will not open that door again. Not for anything. A few minutes passed. maybe longer. Time got strange. I tried putting on music to make the room feel less hollow. I kept checking the lock, like it might undo itself. Then I heard it again. Mole. The same voice, the same tone, the same exact familiarity. And that's when the thought slid into my mind, quiet and terrifying. What if something is mimicking her? I hate even saying it out loud because it sounds like a scary story you'd tell someone else, not something you'd admit happened to you. But in that moment, it made a horrible kind of sense. The voice, the timing, the way it came from different directions, the feeling of being watched even when I couldn't see anyone. So I stayed in my room the entire time until evening, barely working, barely breathing normally, trying to act like I was fine while my body insisted I wasn't. Every little sound made me tense. I kept the music going just to cover the silence, because the silence felt like an invitation. Finally, when the family came home later, the house filled up again. Voices, footsteps, doors opening, the normal mess of life. And the relief I felt, it was physical, like my muscles finally unclenched. Later, I found out what likely caused the crash. The wall clock downstairs had somehow come loose and fallen. That part at least had an explanation, a simple one. But the voice? I still don't know. Because I'm not guessing when I tell you this. I heard the grandmother's voice 3 separate times, clear enough that my body reacted before my mind could even argue. And what's strange is that the clock fell right when I was on the terrace, like the house waited until I stepped into that bright open space. So was it all coincidence? Just stress and silence and a falling clock? Or did something in that quiet house learn the safest voice it could use to get me to open my door? I don't know. But I know what it felt like. And I know I'm grateful I closed my door behind me. You know, I was always closest to my mom's mom, my nanny. When I was little, our whole family used to live with her, and I swear, that house felt like it was built out of warmth. She spoiled me in the quietest ways. Extra food on my plate, her hand on my head, the way she'd smile like I was her favorite secret. Then my dad got transferred for work, and we moved to another city. After that, every time I visited Nani's place, it felt like the air had shifted. The rooms were the same, the furniture was the same, but something in me didn't settle at night. I'd lie there staring into the dark, thinking, please, when will morning come? Like I was waiting for daylight to rescue me. As time went on, Nani started coming to stay with us sometimes too, but she had changed. Not in a loud way, in a subtle, unsettling way. She began saying odd things, especially at night. She'd suddenly, mid-sentence, and say, someone just passed in front of me. Like she'd seen a figure slip by, just out of reach. And then she started describing something that made my skin go cold. She said that when she tried to sleep, this big, rough, bear-like thing would come near her. Hairy, heavy, almost animal. She said it would try to grab her with its claws. And then there was what my older uncle's wife, my Chachi, who lived in a separate house nearby, told us. She said that when Nani wasn't home, she sometimes heard noises from inside Nani's house, like someone muttering under their breath. And once, she heard this sharp sound, like cloth tearing, like someone was ripping fabric in the dark. All of this came from Nani herself and the people around her. And honestly, it sat in my chest like a stone. That summer, my school vacation started, and I went to stay with Nani for a few weeks. The moment I arrived, the place felt wrong. Not like horror movie wrong, more like abandoned in the heart wrong. People didn't visit like they used to. The laughter that used to float in and out of the courtyard was gone. Even the neighborhood felt quieter. Like everyone had learned to keep their distance. and nights were the worst. My younger uncle was often away for work. Sometimes he wouldn't come back at all, and my older uncle was also mostly out. So as soon as the sun dipped, my chachi and my cousins would lock themselves inside their house. Doors bolted, lights low, everyone close together. And on Nani's side, it was just me and her. Two people in a big, too quiet house. Nani would sit on the veranda in the evenings, the kind of time when the sky turns that dusty blue. She'd pull me close and make me sit right beside her like she used to when I was small. But then she'd say things that made my throat tighten. She'd whisper, almost confidently, "Watch, something bright will pass in front of us any second." And I'd stare. I really would. I'd stare so hard my eyes would water. But I never saw anything. Then she'd say, "There are spiders inside my mosquito net." And she'd point, insisting she could see them crawling. I'd look again. Nothing. Just shadows. Just netting. Just my own fear growing louder. And I won't lie, I was terrified. Not just of what she was describing, but of how real it seemed to her. The way she'd speak like she was reporting something obvious, like she was describing a person walking by in daylight. Years later, Nani passed away. It wasn't sudden. She'd been ill. It turned out she had a brain tumor. And even now, I miss her so much it surprises me sometimes. Like grief can still tap you on the shoulder years later and say, "Hey, remember? Was she truly seeing those things? Or was it the tumor? Hallucinations? Confusion? Her brain misfiring in the dark?" I don't know. And maybe that's where the story would end. Except there's one part that still makes me pause. Because that same bear-like presence she described, hairy, heavy, reaching, my mother once told me she saw something like it too, around the time I was born. She said it would come close, trying to touch her, and the strangest part was this. She said it felt cold. Not like a person, not like skin, like the kind of cold that doesn't belong. And my aunt, my Masi, she told a similar thing. Before she had her son, she went through multiple miscarriages. It was a painful time for her, physically and emotionally. And she said during that period, she saw that same presence more than once. That same shape. That same feeling of it trying to come near her. So even though my brain wants to choose the logical answer, wants to say, it was illness, it was the tumor, there's this other part of me that stays quiet and unsure. Because grief and fear and love, they don't always fit into clean explanations. All I know for sure is this. My Nani loved me deeply, and I loved her back. And somewhere inside that love, there's also this unanswered darkness, something I still don't completely understand, no matter how many years pass. Hey, so this is one of those stories I never know how to tell without my chest getting tight. When I was really little, around 3, my mom went to prison, and my dad wasn't in a place where he could take care of me. So I ended up in foster care. I bounced around for a while, different homes, different rules, different temporary everything, until one family finally kept me. And it was with them that the unexplainable stuff started happening. What's strange is, it wasn't just one creepy house. It followed us to 2 different places. That's what still messes with me. I'll go in order. The first thing, I actually forgot it for years. It only came back recently because of a random conversation about memory. Someone was talking about mixing up details around a death, how their brain kind of stitched 2 separate moments together. And for some reason, that cracked something open in my head, and this old memory just surfaced. And here's the part I can't explain. It doesn't feel like the kind of memory that should wreck me. Nothing happens to me directly, but every single time I think about it, I tear up. Like, immediately. Even right now, I can feel it. We were living in Columbus, Ohio. A busy neighborhood. Kids outside, driveways full of bikes, and there was a church at the end of the street. I slept upstairs, but it wasn't really a bedroom. No door, no privacy, just an open space at the top of the stairs. My little setup was a bed, a dresser, and the attic entrance nearby. 2 rooms connected to that upstairs area. One was my foster brother's room, and the other was my foster grandpa's. I'll call him Grandpa Dale. One night I woke up and felt terrified, like instant fear, the kind that hits before you even know why. I got out of bed and went to Grandpa Dale because I didn't know what else to do. But to reach his door, I had to pass the stairwell. It was dark, pitch dark. I knocked, and Grandpa Dale opened the door, sleepy and confused. And then, we both looked down the stairs at the same time, and we froze. At the bottom of the staircase there was something. It was low to the ground, but it wasn't small. Like, it had weight, a presence. The shape reminded me of a person, but not right, not standing like a person should. I remember seeing it move, and I swear, this is the part that makes my throat close up. I swear it felt like it was starting to come up the stairs. Grandpa Dale didn't say a word. He just grabbed me so fast, pulled me into his room, shut the door, locked it, and put me in his bed like he was trying to shield me with his body and the whole room. We lay there until we eventually fell asleep. After I remembered that memory, I tried to connect it to anything else. Like maybe I fell down the stairs a lot, or had nightmares near them, or something. But nothing fits. I mean, I got pushed down them a few times by a cousin, and I used to sit there during Christmas playing a little handheld game system, but nothing that explains that feeling. And there's another weird piece from that same house. My biological grandpa died while we lived there. He didn't live with us, but he visited. And I have this memory, clear as day, of sitting on a couch near the stairs, talking to him like everything was normal, even though I know he was already gone. I've tried to tell myself it's just my brain being a kid brain, but I don't know. Not long after that, we moved. Grandpa Dale loved taking me to local gatherings, powwows, and community events. We'd eat food by a fire, listen to drums, and people would dance and laugh. I remember face paint sometimes. I remember feeling like, for once, life was kind of colorful. But inside that house, at night, it was different. In that place, I shared a room with 2 of my foster brothers. We had bunk beds. One time we stayed up late, just whispering, being kids, trying to push bedtime as far as we could. That's when we first heard it. A sound on our bedroom door from the hallway. Not a tap, not a bump, a scratch. Deep, slow, heavy, like something dragging nails, too thick to be a pet, across the door in a long, deliberate line. We stayed up other nights after that, and it happened again. Same sound, same pace, like whatever it was had all the time in the world. We used to sneak out at night for candy and snacks, so our foster parents put a motion detector alarm outside our door. If you stepped out, it should have screamed. But the scratching kept happening, and the alarm never went off. There were never any marks on the door either. No proof, just the sound. Eventually we figured out something dumb. If you crawled close to the floor, you could slip past the motion detector without triggering it. So one night, me and my oldest foster brother did it. We crawled out like little burglars, trying not to laugh. We made it into the living room, and right as we passed through, a lamp turned on. Grandpa Dale was sitting there in the dark like he'd been waiting. He didn't yell. He didn't rant. He just told us to stand in 2 corners of the room. I stood near the fireplace. My brother stood by the front door. Grandpa Dale told us to face the corner until he came back. Then he walked into his room, and the lamp clicked off again. So we're standing there in the dark, staring at the wall, trying to be brave. And then, the window near the front door shattered, like exploded. My foster brother screamed. I spun around, but I couldn't see anything. Grandpa Dale came rushing out, flipped on a light, and the window was completely fine. No broken glass, no cracks, nothing. But my foster brother was on the ground, clutching his leg, and there was a long gash down the side like something had sliced him open. Grandpa Dale told me to go back to bed. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I just went. Not long after that, they took down the motion detector. And then there was another night, same house, where something happened that still doesn't feel real when I replay it. I woke up and looked down at the lower bunk for my foster brother, because we were sharing a bunk bed at that point. He wasn't there. I got up and checked the bathroom. Empty. So I walked out into the living room, and the kitchen light was on. At the desk in the corner, my foster grandma, Marilyn, was on the computer. She was playing one of those little hidden object games people used to play online. And behind her, my foster brother was standing there, quietly, slowly, scratching her head with his fingertips, just gently raking his nails through her hair, like he was soothing her. But it didn't feel soothing. It felt wrong, like he wasn't fully there. My foster grandma calmly closed the game, stood up and said, "Time for bed," like she'd just been reminded of something. She said yes, but I had to get my sleeping bag and sleep on the floor. So I did. I dragged my sleeping bag in there, laid it out, and got down on the ground. Her closet door was slightly open. The room was dark except for faint light from somewhere outside. She fell asleep fast. I stared at that closet, and the shadows started moving. Not like, "Oh, your eyes are adjusting," moving. Like something moving. They slid downward, pooling onto the floor, and then they moved across the room. Not like a person walking, but like something slithering, like snakes made of darkness. They came together into one bigger shape, and it rushed me. I remember the sensation of being lifted, like hands at my throat, and then being slammed hard into the floor. And then everything snapped into a nightmare so vivid, it still feels like it happened in real life. In the dream, I woke up in my own bed like it was morning. Everything seemed normal. Grandpa Dale had made breakfast. We were sitting at the table on these funny, mismatched chairs we had, like something you'd see at a restaurant, not a house. I remember thinking how weird they looked, even in the dream. I looked down at my eggs. The yolk moved. It wriggled like it was alive, then hopped off my plate and shot straight into my foster brother's mouth. And something changed in him. Something took him over like a switch flipped. And then he hurt everyone. Everyone but me. I was begging him, crying, trying to remind him who I was, trying to make him remember that I was his brother, that we were kids, that this wasn't real. And as I begged, the house started falling apart. Walls dissolving, floor breaking up, until it wasn't a house anymore. It was a desert. Just sand and empty space and heat. He looked at me, really looked at me, right in the eyes. And I woke up. But when I woke up, I wasn't on the floor in my sleeping bag. I was on my foster grandma's bed. Her bedroom door was open, and my foster brother was standing in the doorway, peeking around it, staring straight at me like he'd been there for a while. After that, I don't remember big dramatic moments as clearly. I mostly remember the constant feeling, like I was being watched, like the air could turn heavy at any moment, like the dark in that house wasn't just darkness. And once we left that foster family, things mostly stopped. I've had a few odd experiences since then, Little things here and there, but nothing like those years. Nothing like those 2 houses. And even now, I still don't know what any of it meant. I just know it stayed with me. Okay, I need to say this out loud to someone before I do something I can't undo. Before I decide whether or not to hit play. So, my name's Mara. I live by myself. No roommates, no pets, nothing smart in my apartment except my phone. It's always been quiet here. Peaceful, even. Or it was. Until a couple nights ago. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. because my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I remember thinking it was just some random notification, like an app update or a spam text. But when I looked at my screen, there was a video file sitting there, saved 1 minute ago, and my stomach dropped because I didn't record anything. I didn't set a timer. I didn't fall asleep watching something. I didn't do that half-awake, hit record by accident thing. I'm not guessing. I'm absolutely sure. Still, I was groggy and confused, and I opened it. It was 49 seconds long. At first, it was just my bedroom, dark and quiet. And what freaked me out immediately was the angle. It was the exact angle my phone would have had sitting on my nightstand, pointed out into the room. For a second, I tried to laugh it off, like maybe my phone glitched or I somehow triggered the camera in my sleep. But then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. This breathing was slow, heavy, and so close to the mic it sounded like someone was practically pressing their mouth against it. Then the camera tilted, just a little, and I realized the phone wasn't on the nightstand anymore. Someone was holding it. The lens pointed straight at my bed, straight at me, dead asleep on my side, blanket pulled up to my shoulder like I always do. And then, something stepped into view. Bare feet, pale skin, tall, too tall, like the proportions didn't make sense. The camera never showed a face. It was like the space above the shoulders was just swallowed by darkness. No features, just a void where a head should have been. And it stood there, for the rest of the video, not moving, not doing anything dramatic, just watching me. The clip ended, and my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone. I immediately checked the file info. It said it was recorded at 3:13 a.m. Location? My apartment. I didn't sleep after that. I turned on every light I had. I checked the closet, the bathroom, behind the shower curtain like an idiot in a horror movie, the kitchen cabinets, everywhere a person could hide even if it made no sense. The front door was deadbolted. The windows were locked from the inside. There was nothing. No sign of anything. So I tried, really tried, to convince myself it was sleepwalking, or a prank, or some weird phone bug. I kept telling myself, Mara, you're tired, you're stressed, you're being dramatic. But the fear didn't go away. It sat in my chest like a weight. I went to work the next day barely functioning. Around lunchtime, I decided I had to show someone, just one person, because I needed proof that I wasn't losing it. I opened my gallery to pull up the video. It was gone. Not in my camera roll, not in the cloud, not in recently deleted, not anywhere, like it had never existed. And that scared me more than the video itself, because it meant, whatever did it, could access my phone whenever it wanted, even while I was awake, even while it was in my hand. So last night, I did everything I could think of. I didn't plug my phone in. I powered it off completely. I covered the front and back cameras with thick black tape, like layered it. I put the phone face down on the dresser across the room, as far from my bed as I could, and I slept with every light on, Every single one. When I woke up this morning, the lights were off. All of them. And my mouth went dry because I don't turn off my lights in my sleep. I don't. I know I don't. I looked at the dresser. My phone was face up, right above where my head rests. Like someone placed it there on purpose. Like a note. The phone was on. Battery, 96%. And there was a new video, 3 minutes long. I'm sitting in my car in my office parking lot right now, trying to breathe like a normal person and pretend I'm not completely falling apart. I haven't opened it yet. My thumb keeps hovering over it, because I'm terrified of what I'll see, but I'm even more terrified of what happens if I don't watch it. So yeah, that's where I am. I haven't hit play. Not yet. So, I guess I should start by saying I'm not really someone who chases attention. I know how the internet can be. People will say anything for a reaction. But I've always had this quiet little collection of strange moments. And once in a while, I just feel like telling them the way they happened. When I was a kid, me and my mom lived in this older house in the historic part of our town. That place had its own weirdness, but honestly, my mom's experiences were the kind that made mine feel like background noise. Like she was living in a horror movie and I was just hearing the soundtrack. After that, we moved to another house, and that's where things got more obvious. There were days we'd look out back and see this man, always the same look, white button-up shirt, dark pants, standing just behind the fence like he'd been there the whole time. Our yard sloped down into this big hill, so you could see everything clearly. And he'd just appear. Not walking in, not coming from anywhere. One moment nothing, the next moment, him. Still, like he was waiting for someone who never showed up. But the house that sticks with me the most was the last place I lived before my most recent move. That one gave me stories for life. It was the kind of house where you'd hear footsteps when nobody was moving, where something would rustle or shift out in the backyard, and you'd look, and 3 different people would swear they saw 3 different things. Like whatever was out there couldn't decide what shape it wanted to be. And then there was what I always call the fake cat incident. That's a whole thing on its own. This sound we heard that was so close to a cat, but wrong in this way that makes your stomach tighten, like it was practicing. Which, I guess, leads right into the weirdest part. The mimicry. This is the strangest thing that ever happened to me, and somehow, it wasn't the scariest. It was more like reality glitching right in front of me. It was last year when the first one happened. My mom sneezed. Just a normal sneeze. And I did what I always do. I called out, "Bless you." And then, from down the hallway to my left, toward my parents' bedroom, I heard my voice. Not kind of my voice. Not similar. It was me, my exact tone, my exact rhythm, the same casual little inflection, saying, "Bless you." I just froze. Not in a dramatic way. More like my brain stalled out trying to file it somewhere that made sense. The second time hit different though, because it didn't just mess with me, it messed with my mom too. One day she came up to my door and knocked to ask me something. I opened it, and she practically jumped sideways into the wall next to the door like she'd been startled by a snake. I was like, "Mom, what was that? What's wrong?" And she stared at me, eyes wide, and said, "When I called your name a minute ago, I heard your voice coming from down the hall toward our room." That one actually got under my skin, because my mom doesn't spook easily. She's been through things, real things, and it takes a lot to shake her. Seeing her react like that made it feel more serious somehow, like it wasn't just my imagination playing tricks. Like whatever it was had reached out and touched both of us. It was like a small, normal day. I woke up and helped my dad plant this little palm tree near the base of the driveway. I remember the sun, the dirt on my hands, my dad talking while we worked. It felt real in that simple, grounded way. After that, I went inside and played a game I was obsessed with back then, L-Sword. I was the kind of teen who could sink hours into it without noticing time passing. And I know what my account looked like because I checked all the time. My hours, my characters, what quests I was on. That afternoon, when I opened Steam, I noticed something off. My playtime number was lower than it should have been. Not by a tiny bit, by a lot. Enough that I remember staring at it like, that can't be right. I brushed it off and kept playing anyway. I even remember working on this quest line, something that took time, something you don't just forget doing. I played until later in the evening, then eventually went to bed. And then I woke up the next morning, and the palm tree was in a different place. Not a little shifted, not leaning. It was planted at the end of the driveway instead of where we'd put it. And the weird part was the ground. There wasn't torn grass or disturbed soil where it had supposedly been moved. No mess. No sign of a redo. Like the driveway had always been that way, and my memory was the thing that didn't belong. I asked my dad, and he was like, "You left right after we finished and went to sleep. You were knocked out. You must have been exhausted." But that didn't match what I remembered at all. I remembered being awake. I remembered gaming. I remembered the time. I remembered the quest. So I checked again. My hours were back to normal, like nothing had ever happened. The number that had been wrong the day before was suddenly right. And the quest progress I swore I'd made, it hadn't been started. Like that whole evening had been erased. I just sat there staring at the screen, then staring outside, then back at the screen. Like if I looked hard enough, something would blink and confess. But nothing did. And honestly, I didn't have some big conclusion. I didn't turn it into a theory or a warning or a dramatic ending. It was just this one day that didn't fit into the rest of my life neatly. So I did what I usually do with things like that. I stopped tugging on the thread, and I moved on. You know, I don't talk about this much, because even now it still sits in me in a strange way. Back in 2008, I was working as a fire investigator for a big career department. One night, we got hit with a monster job, a 4-alarm fire at this cluster of old industrial buildings, 5 or so of them, all built way back in the early 1900s. Heavy timber, thick brick walls, beautiful in an architectural way, but dangerous as hell when they light up. And here's the thing. For decades, those floors had been scrubbed with this oil-based cleaning stuff, just soaked into the wood over time. So once that fire got going, it wasn't like it was burning on the building. It was burning through it. Like the whole place had been prepped to catch. The call came in around 2:30 in the morning. By the time it calmed down, 2 buildings were gone, and a third was wrecked beyond saving. We spent hours out there, smoke still hanging in the air, everything dripping, everything quiet in that eerie after way fires have. Later that afternoon, a few of us investigators were on scene doing a quick meeting when a captain from one of the engine companies walked over. He looked tired, like the kind of tired that's deeper than sleep. And he said, "I need to tell you something weird." He explained that during overhaul, when they were checking for extension in one of the buildings that didn't fully collapse, he'd been working his way down toward what he thought was the lower levels. Water was deep, visibility was garbage, and the lighting was limited. And then he said, kind of quietly, like he didn't want to hear himself say it out loud. He heard screams. Not faint, not questionable. He described them as blood-curdling, like someone was down there in trouble. But between the water and the darkness, he couldn't do a full search. By the next day, we figured the water would have drained down enough to safely check. And I'll be honest with you, I volunteered. I told myself it was just procedure, just making sure we weren't missing someone. So the next morning, I went in alone. Just me and a big flashlight. The entrance was at street level, but in that building street level was actually like the third floor because the terrain dropped off. Under that you had a basement, and below that a sub-basement, so it was a long way down. The second I stepped inside, the light from outside just died behind me. Where my flashlight wasn't pointed, it was pure black. Not dim, not shadowy. I mean black, like the darkness had weight to it. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, and the only sounds were my breathing and the stairwell. Those old wooden stairs, every step creaked, popped, complained. It sounded like the building was talking back. Now, firefighting and post-fire work is a dark world half the time, so the darkness itself wasn't what rattled me. I was focused, careful, counting steps, watching the beam, doing what I came to do. I kept going down. When I reached the sub-basement level, I slowed, and that's when it happened. Clear as if someone was standing just out of the flashlight's edge, I heard a man's voice, deep, steady, a little rough around the edges, say, "Stop. Don't go any further." It wasn't a growl. It wasn't some spooky movie demon voice. It sounded normal, like a person, like a guy warning you about something ahead. And I froze. So I leaned forward and aimed my flashlight down the stairs. But the stairwell was built with these long drops, each level separated by something like 20 feet, with landings in between. I should have been able to make out at least the shape of the next landing. I couldn't. It was like the beam just ended, like the darkness swallowed it whole. Still, I tried to push through the hesitation. I took 2 more steps down. And that's when the voice came back. Same voice, but louder, sharper, with 0 room for negotiation. "Stop." Not quick, not panicked, just drawn out and final. Like someone reaching right into my chest and flipping a switch. And that was it. I didn't argue with it. I didn't call out. I didn't try to rationalize it. I turned around, and as I started climbing back up, I felt it. The fear finally catching up to me. The kind that makes your whole body vibrate. I wanted to move fast, but I couldn't. Not on those stairs. I had to place every foot carefully, because one mistake down there could have meant a broken leg, or worse. So I climbed, shaking, breathing hard, forcing myself to stay steady. When I finally reached the level where I'd entered, that slice of daylight hit me like a blessing. I stepped out into the sun and just stood there for a second, letting my eyes adjust, letting my heartbeat slow down. Later, I told my chief I couldn't complete the search, said it was too dark, too unsafe, which was true. I did not tell him about the voice. I already knew how that conversation would go. I didn't feel like being the story people told at the kitchen table. A few days later, the decision was made to demolish that structure. Once they cleared it down near the basement level, we brought in a cadaver dog. Nothing. Then, just to be thorough, a forensic team combed through the area. They found nothing. No remains. No sign anyone had been trapped down there. So what was it? I can't label it for you. I'm not here to prove anything. I just know what I heard, and I know how real it felt in that moment. And I'll tell you this, I've been in a lot of dark places, in a lot of dangerous buildings, in situations where your brain can play tricks on you. But that voice didn't feel like a trick. It felt like a warning, and I'll carry that with me for the rest of my life. Hey, can I tell you something I don't usually say out loud? I grew up in a house that didn't feel empty. From the time I was a toddler until the day I left at 18, there was always something there. I don't know what word fits best. Ghosts, demons, leftovers of people, impressions stuck like fingerprints in the air. I just know it was real, and it wasn't shy about proving it. It's funny what you can normalize when it's all you've ever known. People picture hauntings as one dramatic moment, one scream, one slammed door, and then it's over. But mine was routine, predictable. Like the house had a schedule, and every night it punched the clock. For me, it always came back to the closet in my room. Yeah, I know, the closet. But listen, mine didn't even have a door. Just an old, heavy curtain, the kind that should have hung still unless you brushed past it. And every night, almost like it was timed, right around 2:07 a.m., that curtain would start moving. Not a little flutter. Not like, maybe the vent kicked on. We didn't have central air, and the window unit was down the hall in the living room. No, this was a slow, deliberate wave, like someone breathing behind it. Then the shadows would show up. At first it was just around the closet, like darkness pooling on the floor. But it wouldn't stay there. It would stretch out, sliding across the room in long, unnatural fingers, until it reached the big window. This gorgeous old picture window that took up most of the wall. Outside it, there was this enormous pecan tree, knotted and ancient, the kind of tree that looks like it's been watching you longer than you've been alive. When the shadows reached that window, the curtains there would start to sway too, like a breeze had entered the room and chose only fabric to touch. And then the temperature would drop. Not a little chilly. I mean the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache. Even in summer. Even when the air outside was thick and hot. The darkness would keep thickening until it didn't feel like normal night anymore. It felt layered. Like someone kept throwing heavier and heavier blankets over the room. I had a nightlight plugged in back then, one of those small ones shaped like a star. And the weirdest part? You could still see it, but it stopped lighting anything. Like it was trapped under gauze. Like the glow was being swallowed before it could reach the walls. And then, something darker than the darkness would move. Sometimes it looked like a person, tall, human-shaped, but made of pure pitch. Not shadow, not dimness, more like a cutout of nothing. It would stand beside my bed, right between me and that dull little dot of the nightlight, and it would just watch. There were nights I'd wake up and I couldn't move, not even a finger. My eyes would be open, my chest would work, but my body didn't belong to me. And that shape would drift around the bed, slow as sinking smoke, until it hovered right above my face. So close, I swear it was an inch from my nose. And the thing is, even in a room that dark, it stood out. That's what made it so terrifying. It was darker than the darkness, like a void with edges. Sometimes it would slide off to the side and the bed would bounce, like someone had pressed a knee into the mattress. As a kid, that kind of fear doesn't just scare you, it rewires you. I stopped sleeping in my room for a while. I flat out refused. I'd curl up on the living room couch instead, thinking I'd outsmart it by changing locations. That didn't help. And one night, this part still makes my stomach tighten. I saw a woman. She looked exactly like my mother. Same face, same hair, Same way she held her shoulders, but she was wearing a dark dress, and she stood over the couch where I'd been trying to sleep and looked down at me with this expression I can only describe as pure hatred. Not anger, not annoyance. Hatred. Cold and intense, like it rolled off her in waves and soaked into me. I started crying. I couldn't stop it. The feeling was so heavy I felt like I was drowning in it. Then she turned and walked straight into my bedroom. A minute later, my real mom came out from the back of the house, sleepy, confused, wearing her pale nightgown, asking me what was wrong. And all I could do was point, shaking, because what do you even say? Mom, you were just in here, but you weren't you. My dad got tired of it eventually, of me sleeping on the couch, of the fear, of the arguments. So he brought home this huge fluorescent shop light, one of those long humming tubes, and mounted it in my room like he was declaring war on whatever lived in my closet. For a while, it helped. Kind of. Because at 2:07, the light would start to fight back. It would hum louder, buzz, flicker, and sometimes these dark rings would crawl across the tube like bruises. If the fuse blew, the whole shadow routine would start like nothing had changed. But if the light held, the closet curtain would still wave. Shadows would still form around the closet. They just wouldn't spread. It would be like a standoff. 30 minutes of buzzing and flickering and that horrible electric hum, and then, suddenly, everything would stop. The curtain would go still. The room would warm back up, and the house would pretend it had never done anything at all. And I remember lying there thinking, very quietly, very carefully, if it can't beat a light, maybe it isn't as powerful as it wants me to believe. My home life wasn't great. School was worse. I was the weird kid, the quiet one, the one people picked at because it was easy and they could. I got lonely in that deep, aching way kids do when they don't feel safe anywhere. And over time, I stopped being afraid of the shadows. Not because they stopped being scary, because I got tired. Because fear takes energy, and I didn't have much left. The haunting was predictable. It had patterns. It had rules. And when something has rules, you start to live around it. I started talking to the closet like it was a roommate. I called the presence in there Mara, just to give it a name that wasn't it. During the day, if a voice ever called my name from a corner, it wasn't Mara. It was a man's voice, low and calm, like someone testing how easily I'd turn my head. But at night, the closet felt feminine. Not gentle, just there. My parents split up. My mom started bringing home men sometimes, guys she met at bars or through friends. Some of them were just friends, sure, but you could tell they were hoping for more by the way they tried too hard to be charming. A few would end up sleeping on the couch. And here's where I'll be honest with you. This is the part that makes me sound terrible, and maybe I was. But I was also a kid who'd spent years being terrorized in my own bed, and I'd started to think the house had a sense of fairness. So I'd offer them my room. I'd smile and act polite like, "Oh, you can take my bed. It's rude to leave a guest on the couch." I'd carry them a blanket. I'd even tell them where the light switch was. And then I'd sleep on the couch and wait. You are not in control here. They would tear out of that house like it was chasing them. One guy didn't even grab his shoes. Another one left his jacket behind and never came back for it. And after the front door slammed and the house went quiet again, I'd walk back to my room, climb into my own bed, and whisper into the darkness, "Good night, Mara." By 18, the bank took the house. Foreclosure. We packed what we could, left the rest, and drove away like we were abandoning a sinking ship. And I still think about that closet sometimes, about the curtain, about the nightly ritual, about how something can live alongside you for so long It starts to feel like part of the architecture. Years later, my older sister stopped by the local auto shop to get a tire patched. The owner, the son of our old neighbor, recognized her name, and of course they started talking about the farmhouse. He told her they'd remodeled it and insisted she come see. So she did. When she came back, she told me the place looked beautiful, brighter, airier, like somebody had finally taught it how to breathe. They'd knocked out the wall that used to be my bedroom and opened up the living room. The big picture window, the one that used to stare at that old pecan tree, was part of the living room now. And the closet? The closet is gone. It's just a wall. No curtain, no dark little mouth of a doorway, nothing to wave at 2:07 a.m. Sometimes I wonder what happened to Mara. If tearing out a closet is enough to erase something like that, or if all they really did was give it a new place to stand in the dark. And if I'm being honest, every once in a while, when I wake up at night and the room feels a little too cold for no reason, I still listen for fabric moving in a breeze that isn't there. Okay, so this all happened today, and I still feel a bit shaky, even saying it out loud. I'm living at home right now with my dad. Mom's away on a cruise, so it's just the two of us. Except Dad leaves for work at around 3 a.m., which means the house is basically mine for the night. Quiet, old floorboards. Every sound feels louder than it should. So this morning I wake up at about 4 a.m. to this weird noise in the kitchen, like a plastic bag rustling or someone messing with packaging. My first thought was, oh, it's the cats, because of course it would be. But it didn't sound like anything a cat would do. It was too deliberate, too steady, and I swear my whole body went cold. I just lay there frozen, listening, trying to convince myself I was half asleep and imagining it. And then, after a bit, I hear a door shut, and it really sounded like our back door. And that's the thing, our house is old, so most doors creak and drag, but the back door is newer, and it has this specific sound when it closes, like a clean, solid thunk. I know it. I've heard it 1,000 times. At that point, I'm properly scared, but I'm still not moving. I keep listening, and then I hear rummaging. Not in the kitchen anymore, closer, like it's coming from Mum's room, which is right next to mine. It sounded like shoeboxes shifting, or a cupboard being opened and closed, that kind of thing. So by around 4:30, I finally get up. I quietly close my bedroom door and, this is going to sound dramatic, but I didn't care. I pull a heavy chest of drawers and wedge it in front of the door. Like, if someone tried the handle, they'd at least have to fight with it. Then I call my dad. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely press the screen. While it's ringing, I grab the first weapon my terrified brain can think of. A lighter and an aerosol can. I know, ridiculous, but it made me feel like I wasn't totally helpless. Dad answers, and he's trying to be calm. He says it could be the cats, maybe even a possum getting in somewhere. But even he pauses and goes, "Yeah, that does sound strange." He tells me I can either stay on the phone with him and check the house, or call the police. So I stay on the phone, just listening, barely breathing, until about 5:15, when it's finally light enough outside that everything doesn't feel like a shadow with teeth. Then I do a full sweep of the house, and nothing. No drawers pulled out, no cupboards open, nothing knocked over. Mom's bedroom door is still shut like it never moved. No signs of anyone being there. It's like the whole thing just never happened. But it did happen. I know what I heard. And then tonight, things got worse. I'm doing dishes and throwing laundry in, trying to act normal, and suddenly one of my cats, Luna, starts acting completely unhinged. Not like zoomies, not playful. She had this wild look in her eyes, like she didn't even recognize me. Teeth showing, low, tense body. She bolts at me, then spins and sprints straight to the back door, the same back door I heard this morning, and she starts clawing at it, then whipping around the dining room, then back to the door again, over and over, like she's tracking something, like she's guarding, almost. And what freaked me out is, we've had animals wander onto the deck before. Birds, possums, even a neighbor's cat once. She's never acted like this. I've honestly never seen her look that angry, or scared, or whatever it was. So now I'm back in my room, door shut, heart racing, telling you this because I feel like I'm losing my mind. And there's more context that makes it all feel heavier. The main thing I remember was this headless mannequin torso with fake blood painted at the neck, mounted near a tree stump down by this little dam area at the back of the property. Like it was meant to be a scene. And later, months after we'd moved in, we found something else tucked away. A tiny hanging planter in a tree with a doll's head inside it, smeared with the same red paint. Mom brushed it off like, oh, she was just artsy. And I tried to laugh it off too, but it stuck with me. And then there's the creek. There was a case years back where a woman was killed and left in a creek not far from here. I knew her kids from school. And that same creek system feeds into the waterway that runs near our place. On top of that, a boy I went to school with drowned in that same stretch after jumping from a rocky ledge. Different incident, same water. I never used to think about any of this in a paranormal way. I didn't. But today, when I heard those noises, my first thought, my immediate, stupid, panicked thought was, what if this place is cursed? And then my friend mentioned the paranormal idea later, and I hated how quickly my brain went, yeah, that would explain it. Because I don't know what's worse, the idea that someone was in the house, or the idea that no one was. Okay, so let me paint the picture, because the vibe of this place matters. I live way out in the Appalachian region of Atlantic Canada, tucked into the kind of mountains where the trees get quiet and the nights feel extra deep. The house itself has been in my family forever. My grandparents built it in the late 70s, and after my grandmother passed, I bought it and kept it in the family. My granddad was gone long before I ever got to meet him, but somehow, he still feels like part of the household, if that makes sense. Right now, it's me, 39, a mom, my boyfriend, who's 38, and my 2 teenagers, my daughter, 17, and my son, 15. We've got 1 dog and 2 cats. We used to have another dog too, but we lost her late last autumn, and the house has felt a little different since then. Not bad, just thinner, like a layer of comfort got peeled away. And here's the thing. This house has always had activity. Always. Knocks on the walls, taps on windows when no one's there. Little sounds like someone shifting around upstairs when everyone's accounted for. I've heard what I swear is a man laughing. Warm, familiar, like it's coming from the wrong side of the years. Once, I was digging around in the storage room and saw just feet. Only feet. No body. Just a pair of feet, standing there like they belonged to someone who forgot to bring the rest of themselves. And listen, I know how that sounds, but none of it ever felt nasty. It never had that get out feeling. It's always been more like, this is just part of the house's personality. Like a harmless roommate you can't see. I'm used to it. Or, I was used to it. Because what happened recently felt different. Not evil, exactly, but too personal, too aware. So my boyfriend was on night shift for a few days. When he works nights, he usually hangs out upstairs until early morning, then comes down to bed after 6. Our bedroom is in the basement, only bedroom down there, and at night I always shut the door. Not because I think something's going to waltz in, but because, I don't know, it's a boundary. It helps my brain relax. Also, this is important. I don't go to bed alone. I don't care how safe a place feels. I need my dog with me. My big, lazy, snoring security system. That first night, I got into bed and I wasn't even close to sleeping yet. I was doing my usual bedtime thing, kind of like a prayer, but not religious. More like a quiet request to the universe. Protect the house. Protect the people inside it. Keep anything weird outside. And right in the middle of that, I hear my boyfriend's voice from across the room. Not full words, more like a throat-clearing sound, a soft cough. But it was him. I know his voice like I know my own. And my first reaction was to pretend I didn't hear it. That's my survival strategy, honestly. I just rolled a little closer to the dog, like, nope, not acknowledging that. Then it happened again. Same spot, same sound. And that's when the dog lifted his head and looked right at the corner of the room. Now, you need to understand, this dog is made of laziness and stubbornness. When my boyfriend comes to bed, he doesn't even flinch. You have to physically negotiate for space. So for him to react at all, for him to look like he heard something, that was the part that made my stomach drop. So I did the bravest thing I could think of in the moment. I turned my phone screen on so the room wasn't completely dark. The next night, my boyfriend was at work again. Kids were upstairs asleep. Just me and the dog in the basement room. Door shut. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb like I always do, and I left my screen on again because I was still freaked out. And then I heard a notification sound. Not my phone. Not beside me. Across the room. A generic little ding, like the default sound on a phone that isn't mine. Except there is nothing over there. No TV, no tablet, no extra device, just darkness and a wall. It happened once. I told myself it was nothing. It happened again, same exact spot, like something was trying to pull my attention right to that corner. And I had this instant mental spiral of, nope, 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 nope. I slid closer to the dog and wrapped an arm around him like he was a life raft. And I remember thinking, very seriously, I have 90 pounds of dog. Nothing is touching me. Which is a ridiculous thought, but when you're scared, you'll grab onto anything that feels solid. The next night was quiet. I was sick and exhausted and basically passed out the second my head hit the pillow. But then my daughter told me something that made it worse. She said that when she's home alone, she hears voices, like people moving around the house. Not clear conversations, just the sound of multiple voices drifting under everything. She'll hear the front door open and close when she knows we won't be home for a long time. She said sometimes, when she's out walking alone, she'll hear someone call her name even though no one's nearby. And she's at that age where she already doesn't want to leave her room, so now she keeps earbuds in when she's alone. Music on. Block it all out. Up until then, the only time I heard voices myself was when I vacuumed, like murmuring under the noise. I'd shut the vacuum off just to see if someone was talking, and then, nothing. So I started wondering if this was something that copies voices, a mimic. I mentioned it to a friend who's into paranormal stuff, and she got excited like, ooh, we should try to communicate. And I was like, absolutely not. Because everything I've ever learned about anything that mimics you is, don't invite it closer. Don't answer it. Don't play games. And then things escalated. To the part that still makes my skin go cold when I think about it. So, my dog's bedtime routine. I know it sounds silly, but it matters. My dog is basically a furry barrel with legs. Solid, short, round. He's on a diet, because now he's the only dog and it's easier to control his food, but he's still built like a footstool. Last year, we lowered our bed because he decided jumping up was too hard, and the little steps we got him were suspicious and terrifying. But he still thinks he needs a running start. Like he'll back up into the main basement area, get a few good trots in, and launch himself like an Olympic athlete. Before that, though, he demands forehead kisses and a couple little snacks. It's a whole ceremony. Once he's in bed, he becomes an unmoving boulder until morning. Also, the bedroom door stays shut all night. Cats don't come in. Nothing should come in. Nothing should go out. Okay. This happened last Thursday. My boyfriend was at work. Just me and the dog. Door shut. Quiet. Dog pressed up against me, snoring like a chainsaw. Head on my boyfriend's pillow like he pays rent. I'm lying on my back, one hand resting on the dog because it calms me, and I'm doing my usual protective bedtime request. And then I felt it. Not a gradual settling. Not the mattress shifting from the dog moving. A jump. Two distinct depressions, like feet or knees, one on each side of my ankles. And then it felt like whatever it was crouched down over my feet and stayed. Just hovering there. Watching. I went completely still. My brain was screaming, but my body did that survival thing where everything locks up. And the dog didn't move. He didn't even pause his snoring, which somehow made it worse, because it meant he wasn't reacting to anything physical that he could sense, but I could feel the bed. I could feel the pressure. After a few seconds, maybe longer, I honestly don't know, I started kicking my feet around like a panicked kid under a blanket, just thrashing, hoping it would get offended and leave. And as quickly as it came, it got off the bed. No footsteps, no voice, no creak. Just the mattress rising back up like whatever had been there simply wasn't. The rest of the night was quiet. I eventually slept, woke up to my alarm like nothing happened. Since then, my boyfriend's been back on day shift, and the nights have been calm again. He still doesn't believe in any of this, of course. The man could watch a ghost make coffee, and he'd call it a draft. But then yesterday, daytime, something happened twice, and it rattled me in a whole new way. I left the house to run errands. The main door we use goes into the garage where my car's parked. I shut it behind me like I always do, and I heard something slam into the inside of the door. Not a little bump, not the house settling. It sounded like someone threw their full body weight against it. I froze with my hand still on the knob. The dog was on the couch. The cats were nowhere near the door. There's nothing hanging there, nothing heavy enough to do that. I stood there for a second, heart pounding, and then I did what I always do when I'm scared. I pretended I wasn't. I ran my errands, came back, tried to shrug it off. Later, I left again. Same door, same normal amount of force when I shut it. And again, wham! Like something sprinted into it from inside the house, full speed, full weight, just to make sure I knew it was there. And that's where I'm at now. Because knocks and murmurs and harmless little weird moments? Fine, I can live with that. But something using my boyfriend's voice, something trying to pull attention from across the room, something crouching on my bed and leaning over my feet, and then something slamming itself into the door like it's angry I'm leaving, that doesn't feel like the usual house personality. That feels like something new, and I don't like it. So, not long after this other weird parenting moment we'd had in our house, something started happening with my middle kid, Noah. He was about 4 then, tiny little guy, still in that stage where they're all elbows and blankets and sudden big feelings. For a stretch of nights, I'd bolt awake to him screaming, like real screaming, pure terror. His room was on the same floor as his older brother's, closer to street level, and my room was up on the top floor. So every time it happened, I'd be flying down 2 flights of stairs in the dark, half asleep, heart pounding, trying not to trip over anything. Most of the time, when I got to him, he was still sort of asleep, like eyes open but not really there. I'd scoop him up, rock him, murmur the usual soft parent stuff. "You're okay. I've got you. You're safe." And within minutes, he'd melt back down. By morning, he wouldn't remember a thing. It felt like ordinary nightmares, or maybe night terrors. Unsettling, but explainable. But then there were a couple nights that were different. One night, I ran in and he was sitting straight up in bed, crying in that way where it's not just tears, it's panic. I sat on the edge of his bed and pulled him into me, rubbing his back, asking him what happened, what he saw, what scared him. And he looked right at me, completely awake, completely focused. And he said, very clearly, "There's a demon in my room." I swear my stomach just dropped. It's like your whole body reacts before your brain even catches up. I tried to keep my voice calm, because the last thing you want is for them to see you scared. But I asked him what he meant. Like, "What do you mean, sweetheart? Show me, tell me." And he kept repeating it, getting more upset, like he couldn't find the words fast enough. Then he said something that made my skin go cold. He told me the demon was lifting his head up off the pillow and dropping it back down again, over and over. Not like a dream where things are vague and floaty. He described it like it was a physical thing happening to him. He even demonstrated it a little with his hands, like he was trying to show me the motion. And he kept repeating it. It picked my head up. It dropped it. It picked it up. It dropped it. Like it wouldn't stop. And then he pointed to the corner of the room. That part is what really stuck with me. Because kids can imagine all sorts of things, but he wasn't waving around randomly. He kept pointing to the same corner, same spot. So of course I looked. I actually got up and checked. Closet, behind the door, under the bed, the whole routine. Because what else do you do when your 4-year-old is shaking and telling you something is in the room with him? There was nothing. Just shadows and toys and the quiet hum of the house at night. But the worst part is, it wasn't just once. It happened again on another night. Same words, same corner, same description, his head being lifted and dropped onto the pillow. And after that, it didn't stay trapped in nighttime. He'd mention it during the day sometimes, like it was still on his mind. Not constantly, but enough. Enough that it didn't feel like a one-off bad dream. Over the next few weeks, maybe longer, honestly, time gets fuzzy when you're exhausted. He kept describing the same thing. The demon, the corner, the head lifting, the dropping. I know kids can have night terrors. I know their brains do wild stuff when they're little. I kept telling myself that. Yeah, that shook me more than I like to admit. Welcome back to the Paranormal M channel, everyone. How's your day going? I'm so excited to be here and share spooky, real-life experiences from all over the world with you. Thank you so much for sending in your stories, and please, keep them coming. By the way, have you been having trouble sleeping lately? Don't worry, we've got you. Now go ahead and get comfy in bed, switch on your nightlight, and let's dive into today's paranormal stories. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Okay, so let me tell you about this place, because it's the kind of story that sounds exaggerated until you're standing in the middle of it, feeling your skin prickle for no good reason. It's a 2-story farmhouse out in the middle of wide open land, about 150-ish acres, give or take. Been in the same family forever. Not a cute, old house with charm situation either. More like a house that's always been awake, always listening, always doing something. And what makes it even stranger is how long it's been going on. Not a few spooky months. Not since the owners remodeled. I mean generations. People have been talking about footsteps, voices, doors slamming, lights acting wrong, since at least the 1930s, and honestly, probably earlier. It's like the house has kept a running routine of reminding everyone, I'm still here. Here's the part that always gets me. In this family, almost nobody could stand staying there overnight. Like, most of them wouldn't even nap upstairs. They'd visit for a few hours, keep the lights on, joke around to stay brave, and then leave before it got dark. Except for two people. One was the grandfather, Hank, and the other, years later, was the current owner, a woman named Marin. Hank loved the property. He wrote about it when he was away in the Navy during World War II, how he couldn't wait to be back, how he wanted to raise a family there. He eventually bought the land, moved in with his wife Lottie, and they raised their kids in that house like it was the most normal thing in the world. But the kids? Oh, they hated it. Both of them, even now in their 70s, still talk about that house like it's a place you don't fully escape. They remember hearing heavy footsteps upstairs when nobody else was there, doors opening on their own, voices drifting down from the second floor like someone was talking just out of earshot. And the upstairs, especially the east bedroom, always felt wrong, like the air got heavier as you climbed the stairs. Lottie and her siblings had been saying that for as long as anyone could remember. They grew up in that house and swore the upstairs had a presence that didn't want you comfortable. Now, the house itself is old, built in the 1880s, stone foundation, later reinforced in a couple stages. Renovations over the decades, but still very much the same bones. Living spaces on the first floor, and then 4 bedrooms upstairs that seem to hold the worst of it. And no, this isn't one of those stories where everything starts after someone dies. There were deaths on the property. Lottie passed in the house, and so did her mother before her. But the activity was happening long before any of that. No abuse stories, no dramatic tragedy, no, and then we found a hidden room. Just an active house that never really quieted down. After Hank died in 2004, Lottie lived there alone for years, and she still reported things. The upstairs lights started turning on and off even though she physically couldn't climb the stairs anymore. It got so frequent that the family finally had an electrician disconnect the upstairs lighting altogether. The electrician checked everything and basically shrugged. No short, no obvious wiring issue, nothing that should be doing it. Then one night, this detail makes my stomach clench. Lottie was lying in bed, awake, and the covers were yanked clean off her like someone had grabbed them and thrown them onto the floor. And because families do what families do, her kids tried to laugh it off. Oh, Mom, that's just Hank messing with you. Like if they made it a joke, it couldn't hurt her. But even they didn't believe their own explanation. Especially because Hank wasn't the kind of haunting you could pin this on. The house had been doing this long before he ever died. They told stories about heavy bootsteps pacing overhead, doors slamming upstairs in the middle of the night, sounds like the kitchen being rummaged through while everyone was lying there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. And one year, they walked into the living room and smelled fresh cigar smoke, like someone had just lit one. Hank loved cigars. The smell was so specific it made the hairs stand up on their arms. Then, the house sat mostly empty for about a decade. After Lottie passed in 2015, it stayed maintained, but nobody really lived there. Just the occasional visit, the hunting season guests, the land being watched over by the family trust, until Marin moved back in. She and her husband Eli came in September of 2025, and almost immediately, the house started up like it had been waiting. At first it was almost playful. They'd sit in the living room watching TV and watch the master bedroom door swing open, then ease shut, then open again, right in front of them. Not from a draft. They checked vents, windows, all of it. Nothing. One of their dogs, a scent hound named Clover, would sit there and stare at the door like she was watching someone invisible. Marin and Eli actually laughed about it in the beginning, like, well, okay, the house is showing off. But Eli started hearing footsteps upstairs at night, steady, heavy, like a man in boots pacing directly over their bedroom. He wasn't panicked at first because Marin had warned him, and the dogs weren't reacting the way they would if there was a real intruder. So he told himself it was just the house being the house. That door swinging thing lasted about a month, then stopped. Around the same time, they had mice. Real mice, actual normal explanation. Scratching in the walls, little taps, faint movement in the kitchen. The dogs growled at a corner of the kitchen, and they assumed, yep, mice. They hired an exterminator, got it handled by early October, and that's when it got harder to explain. Because after the mice were gone, the same kinds of noises kept happening. Footsteps, things shifting, soft banging like somebody bumping cabinets. Except now, there wasn't a logical culprit. October was messy for another reason too. Marin and Eli were dealing with trespassers. Apparently, while the property had been mostly vacant, a group of people had been sneaking onto the land, renting out hunting spots without permission, cutting timber, putting up little structures. It escalated into a civil suit, police calls, game wardens, the whole thing. And one of those people even muttered something nasty to Marin during an argument, something like, "The boys will handle you." So when they came home one day and found their porch furniture flipped over and the dogs losing their minds, they assumed it was human intimidation. They installed security cameras, changed the locks, got serious about safety. They didn't even consider that the house might have been part of it until later, because the other weirdness kept piling up. Doors they knew they latched would be standing open. The upstairs door, the basement access. Not every day, but often enough that it started to feel like someone was deliberately undoing what they'd just done. Then November hit, and the house started messing with access. Eli would step outside to take out the trash or grab something from the garage, and the front door would lock behind him. Not an auto lock. This was a latch you had to turn manually. And it happened again and again. At first he blamed Marin. Marin blamed Eli. And then they had that moment where they both went, "Wait, I thought you did it." After a while, they stopped leaving the house without keys, even for 30 seconds, because being locked out became a normal risk. Another day they came back from visiting family out of town and found the back door standing wide open. The dogs were frantic, barking like mad when they pulled into the drive. But they hadn't bolted outside through that open door. They'd stayed inside, agitated, like something had been moving around in the house while they were gone. And then there was the kitchen. They came home from errands one afternoon and found every cabinet door and drawer in the kitchen open. All of them. Like someone had gone through the room and left it gaping. That's when the dogs changed. Clover, the scent hound, started locking onto one spot in the kitchen, staring at the back wall or the corner where the ceiling met the adjoining section, tail up like she was tracking a live animal. Growling, barking, hackles raised. No sound, no movement, nothing visible. Their other dog, Bramble, was a big sheepdog, protective, watchful, the kind that naturally positions herself between you and a doorway. She started staying awake at night, posted in the entry between the living room and kitchen like she was guarding a boundary, sleeping in the day, watching all night. And the worst part? The dogs started waking them up, over and over, sometimes multiple times a night, barking toward the kitchen like someone was standing in there. Eli would get up, check doors, check windows, scan outside for tracks, even go upstairs and downstairs. Nothing. No animal signs, no break-in, no explanation. They tried shutting the bedroom door to sleep. The dogs panicked, scratched, whined, acted like being trapped away from the kitchen was dangerous. So Marin finally said, "Okay, we need someone to look into this." They contacted an investigation team, and the first visit was just a meet and greet. Mid-morning on December 10th, 2025. They put the dogs in the master bedroom because the dogs bark like crazy at strangers. Everyone sat at the kitchen table going over the process, what the investigators look for, how they set equipment, what can be explained naturally. And right in the middle of it, a pair of missionaries came to the door, doing their Christmas rounds. Eli answered the door. The dogs started barking in the bedroom because of the knock. Marin stepped away to check on them, then returned to the table. And while the investigators were waiting, everyone heard a loud knock from across the house. 4 knocks in a rhythm, clear as day. One of the investigators, Tess, actually assumed it was another visitor who'd walked around to the back door. She asked Marin, "Did you hear that knocking? Do you need to get it?" And Marin, totally casual, said, "Oh, that's probably the dogs. They knock when they want out." But then, this is the moment where the air changed. Another series of loud knocks hit, that same 4-beat rhythm, but this time it was clearly right at the master bedroom door. Not the front door, not outside, the bedroom door. When the missionaries left and everyone came back inside, the team brought it up again. All 4 adults had heard it, and Marin and Eli finally admitted the dogs couldn't make that sound. Not like that. Not that clean, hard, deliberate knocking. They let the dogs out, and the dogs came barreling into the room, agitated and frantic. Nothing looked disturbed in the bedroom. No explanation. Just knocking. And then came the Christmas break. Marin and Eli had their kids home for the holidays, and they were on edge. Not because anything had hurt anyone, but because the house was escalating and they didn't like the idea of the kids being around when things were unpredictable. One afternoon, everyone was spread out. Eli in the kitchen warming soup because everybody had a cold, Marin at her desk in the dining room, the kids in the living room. And 3 things happened at once. And then, this is the part that makes it hard to breathe. Marin turned in time to see a spoon fly across the kitchen and strike Eli in the back. Not slide, not tumble, not fall off a counter. Fly. Eli froze, thinking the bowl had exploded, but the bowl was intact. No mess. Nothing that explained the sound. He called out to the kids to make sure they were okay, because it sounded like something had detonated. Marin tried to recreate it with him later, over and over. Could the microwave pop have jolted the knife loose? Could the knife hitting something have knocked the spoon? But the spoon hadn't even been near where the knife fell. It had come from behind Eli, like it was launched from the opposite side of the room. And of course, the motion cameras weren't rolling then, because the whole house was awake and active. Bad timing. The kind of bad timing that seems to happen a lot in stories like this. After that, the investigation shifted into longer-term monitoring, because this wasn't an abandoned building where you can just lock down and run cameras all night in every room. People were living there. Dogs were living there. Kids visiting. So the team set motion-triggered cameras in key spots, ran audio recorders continuously, took EMF readings, temperature logging, RF monitoring, trying to capture correlations when the family reported events. Baseline readings were pretty normal for an older home. Nothing screaming electrical issue. And weirdly, the house itself had almost no cell service inside, even though outside you could get strong 5G coverage. The building seemed to swallow signals. Over about 3 weeks, the team captured a steady stream of audio events. Footsteps, sudden gasps, banging, scraping, screeching noises that didn't match normal settling or pipes. And the motion cameras? They triggered when nothing visible moved. Sometimes one camera's infrared light would pop on, and you'd see another infrared light kick on in the same room from a different angle, like multiple sensors reacting to something at the same moment. They also caught a looping, orb-like shape making an oval path through the dining room and then lifting up toward the ceiling. And one night, they recorded Clover standing in the dining room, staring around like she was following something, while the camera triggered for a reason that wasn't the dog. The temperature logs showed sharp drops, more than 10 degrees, in different parts of the house. Living room, kitchen, the main bedroom. Then it would slowly rise back to normal. Not like a draft, not like a window leak, not tied to outdoor temperature dips, just a dip and then a return. So what do you call that? That's where it got complicated, because it didn't behave like a residual haunting. It wasn't a repeating, same time, same sound, same path recording. The activity was reactive and erratic. Doors one day, banging another day, something thrown another day. And it loved opening things. Doors, drawers, cabinets, even small stuff like containers and jars. That repetitive, almost obsessive opening and closing behavior made the team lean away from the idea of a simple human spirit, especially because the timeline didn't match family deaths, and the activity predated anyone passing in the home. They even checked local tribal and historical records, contacted the Delaware Nation's Council to see if there were any old settlement or burial ties in the area that might explain a long-standing presence. Nothing came up that matched the property. They ruled out anything demonic, too, because despite the fear and the unease, there wasn't that pattern of harm or escalation that would point toward that, and it didn't respond like it. So they landed on a different working theory, something folkloric. Which, honestly, fits. Because this thing didn't care about the basement. It didn't haunt the newer extension built in the early 2000s. It cared about the original heart of the house, the upstairs bedroom on the east side, the kitchen beneath it, the living room nearby, like it had claimed those spaces a long time ago and never stopped. In the end, the team did something practical and symbolic. They warded the doors. Not the windows, because the goal wasn't to trap whatever it was inside. The goal was to make the house less welcoming, encourage it to leave. They laid salt along the thresholds in a sealed strip, like a draft guard, but spiritual. A clean, solid line, hardened so it wouldn't scatter with airflow or footsteps. Wards above bedroom doorways, and at the main entrances too. And afterward? Things calmed. Not everything stopped forever, not and they lived happily ever after. More like the volume turned down. The family stayed in contact with the team, and the owner still had that very human habit of blaming every missing object on the ghost. Because once you've lived through something like that, it's hard not to. But the worst of the chaos eased. And still, when I think about it, what sticks with me isn't even the flying spoon or the cabinets or the footsteps. It's the idea of a house keeping its own history. A place that outlasts generations and stays exactly as it is. Watching, knocking, opening doors, like it's been waiting 100 years for someone to listen. So this memory popped up again the other day, out of nowhere. I hadn't thought about it in years, and once it surfaced, I couldn't shake it. So I figured I'd finally tell it the way I remember it. I'm 31 now, but this happened when I was really little, early elementary school age. Back then, our gym teacher, Mr. Haskins, would sometimes march us up this small hill for gym days and those school physical check-ins. At the top was our recess playground, and right beside it sat this huge baseball field. Wrapping around both was a gravel track, one of those big, looping ovals. On the corners of the track were these little sheds. They were meant to be snack stands for games, I think. Windows with little counters, like you'd order a hot dog through them. But even then, they looked ancient. Sun-faded paint, warped wood, that slightly sour smell old buildings get when they've been closed up too long. I don't remember ever seeing them open. They just existed. Quiet and kind of sad. One day, we were doing a timed run on the track. I was one of the slow kids, not because I didn't try, but because I had asthma. So the fast group was way ahead, and I was stuck in that awkward middle-late pack with a few other stragglers, mostly spaced out and quiet, all of us trying not to cough and die in front of everyone. As I rounded the far back corner of the track, I passed the shed that always creeped me out the most. I wasn't even looking for anything, just focusing on breathing and the crunch of gravel under my sneakers. But as I came up alongside it, I glanced at the window, and I saw fingers. 5 fingers, pale at first glance, poking out from the nearly closed service window, like someone had wedged their hand through the gap. I didn't register it immediately, like my brain tried to label it as something normal. A glove, a prop, a prank, something. So I kept running for a couple steps. Then my brain caught up and went, "Wait, what?" I looked back, and that's when it fully hit me. The fingers weren't just there, they were curling, like the hand was gripping the outer edge of the stall, trying to pull itself through. And there were thin streaks of red, fresh-looking blood, seeping out around where the hand disappeared inside. Not gallons, just a few narrow trickles, like it was leaking down from the window frame and over the knuckles. And the fingers moved. Not waving, not tapping, more like wriggling, like someone trapped in there was fighting to get out but couldn't. I stopped running. Not screaming, not calling for the teacher, just frozen, staring, with this awful, sinking feeling in my stomach. The kind that tells you, before you even think it, something is wrong. I remember deciding, very deliberately in my little kid logic, that if I acted like I didn't see it, maybe it wouldn't notice me. Like if I didn't make it real, it couldn't become real. So I started running again, and I ran faster than I ever had. I mean, for an asthmatic kid, Olympic speed. I was terrified, and it was like my whole body went into flight mode. I glanced back again a few seconds later. The fingers were gone. No hand, no blood, nothing hanging from the window. Just that same half-closed snack stand, quiet and sun-bleached, like it had been empty for 100 years. But here's the thing. It wasn't a blink. It lasted long enough that I know I saw what I saw. Long enough for me to slow down, stop, look back, stare, and make a choice. Later, because kids are weird and brave in dumb ways, I asked around. I remember bringing it up in that casual, testing the room way, like, "Hey, has anything ever happened near that snack stand?" Still, it didn't help. If anything, it made the whole thing stick harder in my head. I've never had any diagnosis that would explain hallucinations. I wasn't having an asthma attack right then. I wasn't dizzy or overheated or anything like that. It was just a normal school day. Until it wasn't. And after that day, anytime we had to run that track, I'd speed up at that corner. Every single time. I'd stare at the ground. I'd stare straight ahead. I'd do anything but look at that window. Because the weirdest part wasn't even what I saw. It was the feeling afterward. Like the shed had changed. Like there was suddenly something aware there. Like I'd noticed it once, and now it wanted me to notice it again. Almost like it was thinking, "You saw me. Now look back." And I never wanted to. Anyway, that's it. That's the memory. I still can't explain it. I don't know if it was something paranormal, something my kid brain misread, or some bizarre moment that just doesn't fit into a neat box. But I know how it felt, and I know what I saw. So, I'm going to tell you a story that still makes my skin prickle when I think about it. It happened years ago, back in the late 2000s, when everyone still had those slightly clunky phones and calls would randomly drop for no reason. A coworker of mine, let's call her Maya, came into work one morning looking completely wrecked, like she hadn't slept, like she'd been crying, like she'd been carrying something too heavy for her body to hold. She was jittery, distracted, not herself at all. After watching her spiral quietly for an hour or so, I finally asked, "Hey, are you okay?" She hesitated, then leaned in and said, "Can you come outside with me?" So we stepped out where it was quieter, and she kind of hugged her arms around herself like she was bracing against the air. Then she told me, very carefully, "I'm only telling you this because you're open to spiritual stuff. If I tell anyone else, they'll think I'm losing it." And I remember thinking, oh boy, whatever this is, it's big. She said her sister, I'll call her Elena, had been dating a guy long distance named Riley. They'd been together for a while, really intertwined emotionally, the way long distance couples can be. And then, out of nowhere, Riley died. It was sudden, tragic, the kind of death that doesn't give anybody time to catch their breath. Elena was devastated, obviously. She started calling Riley's roommates, trying to piece together what happened, trying to hold on to anything that felt like him. And then something started happening that makes no sense, even now. While Elena would be on the phone with them, Riley would break into the line. That's the only way I can describe it. Like the call would glitch and there'd be this shift in the audio, and suddenly there was another voice, a voice that wasn't supposed to be there. At first, Elena thought they were playing the cruelest joke imaginable. She accused the roommates. She demanded answers. She even called the local police where Riley lived to confirm the death was real. It was real. He was gone. And after that, she tried to rule out everything you'd normally reach for. Prank calls, call forwarding, someone imitating him, some weird phone hack. Except it kept happening across different calls, different numbers, different times. It didn't matter who she called. Sometimes she wouldn't even be talking to the roommates anymore, and it would still happen. And what made it harder to dismiss was this. The voice knew things no one else could know. Little private memories, specific conversations, inside jokes, things that only Riley and Elena would have shared. It wasn't just a voice that sounded like him. It moved like him. The rhythm, the little pauses, the way he'd phrase things. The personality was there. Maya told me Elena and Riley would talk for hours, sometimes all night. And Riley wasn't okay. She said when he came through, he sounded angry and confused, like someone waking up in a place that shouldn't exist. He kept saying everything around him was dark, like, not metaphorically, literally dark, like he couldn't see anything, like he was trapped in some dim, closed space with no bearings. And he complained about his throat hurting. That part hit me because the way he died involved his throat, not in some vague way, directly, as if whatever happened to his body had left an imprint on whatever he was now. And then came the part that made Maya come into work looking haunted. Apparently, one night Riley told Elena, very casually, "I'm going to mess with Maya." Elena was like, "Don't, leave her alone." But Riley insisted, almost amused. He said, "She's going to wake up screaming, and she won't even remember why." And that night, Maya woke up absolutely screaming in her room, full body, terror screaming. Elena ran in, flipped on the light, tried to calm her down, asked what happened. And Maya just sat there, shaking, and said, I don't know." No dream she could describe, no image she could hold on to, just pure fear, like her nervous system had been yanked awake. And later, Riley admitted it, like he was proud of himself, like it was some party trick. Maya was furious, obviously, and Elena was shaken, because what do you even do with something like that? What do you do when grief turns into activity? At that point, Maya didn't know who to talk to, so she talked to me, and I became her safe person, the one she could unload onto without being laughed at or diagnosed or dismissed. I didn't really know what I believed, but I believed her. I believed that she believed it, and I believed she wasn't trying to spin a ghost story for attention. She was scared. She was exhausted. She was too raw for theatrics. And then came the moment that turned it from, my friend is telling me something impossible, into, this is happening to me right now. A few nights later, Maya called me while I was heading home. I was riding the bus, the kind with fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look tired and slightly green. We were just talking, normal stuff, trying to keep things light, when she said, almost offhandedly, Elena and Riley are talking right now. And I remember saying, right now? Like, on the phone? Yeah, she said, like, currently. A minute passed, maybe 2. And then, on my call with Maya, my regular cell phone call, I heard the line shift. That subtle, clicky, hollow change you sometimes get when a call gets unstable. And then a third voice slid into the space between our words. It was low, gravelly. It sounded like someone forcing air through a damaged throat. And it said, in this horrible, rasping insistence, Maya, Maya, Maya. Over and over, like it was trying to pull her attention through the speaker. I went cold. Not like goosebumps cold, like my whole body forgot how to be warm. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers hurt. My brain did that thing where it wants to scream but also wants to pretend nothing is happening, because acknowledging it makes it real. When I finally managed to speak, my voice came out thin and shaky. Maya, can you hear that? And she went, hear what? Like, nothing. Like the line was normal for her. She even laughed a little, like she thought I was joking or maybe hearing street noise from the bus. Then she said, hang on, call me back. So I did, immediately. And when she picked up again, I said, that voice, did you seriously not hear it? She swore she hadn't. She couldn't hear anything. But I had, clear as day. And the strangest part was the feeling that the voice wasn't trying to reach me. It was looking for her, like I was just in the way, like I happened to be holding the line it could slide through. I don't remember every detail after that, because once your nervous system goes into full shock, time turns syrupy and inconsistent. But over the next months, Maya told me Riley's energy changed. And then something happened that, to this day, makes my throat tighten when I tell it. Maya and Elena's father had died unexpectedly, not long before all of this. It had been the kind of loss that leaves loose ends everywhere, things unsaid, conversations that never got to happen, the kind of death that doesn't come with closure. One night, during a call with Riley, Elena said she heard someone else. Not Riley, their dad. And I know how that sounds. Trust me, I know. I'm telling you exactly how it was told to me, and I can't prove it, and I can't package it neatly. But Elena insisted the voice was unmistakable. His tone, his warmth, even the way he'd clear his throat before he spoke. He talked about little details, shared memories, like the motorcycle shows he used to take them to, the smell of gasoline and popcorn, the way he'd point out the old bikes and tell stories like he was welcoming them into some secret club. He said he loved them. He said he was proud of them. And when they asked if they needed to change anything, if they needed to live differently, he said basically, no. Just keep going. Keep being who you are. And whether someone believes in that kind of contact or not, the effect on them was real. They got to say goodbye in a way they hadn't been able to. They got to breathe again. Over time, Riley's calls became less frequent, more distant, like a radio station fading as you drive away from the city. And then, eventually, he stopped coming through. Just gone. I've thought about it 1,000 times since then. I've tried to lay logic over it, tried to pin it down with explanations. Grief does strange things. The mind does strange things. Technology does strange things. And yet, I can't unhear what I heard on that bus. I can't unfeel the way the air seemed to change in my body when that third voice entered the line. Most people I've told either joke about it or get quiet and uncomfortable and change the subject. Only a couple people have ever taken it in without trying to swat it away. But I'll tell you this, whether you call it spirits or some liminal echo or a mystery we don't have language for, it left me with one solid truth. This world is bigger than what we can touch. And sometimes, when you least expect it, something reaches through the cracks and reminds you. Okay, so let me tell you about this place because it's one of those stories that sounds totally normal right up until it doesn't. We bought this old house that we now run as a little business, and before anything weird ever happened, I did what everyone does. I went digging online. On satellite images, it looks like the house has been sitting there since at least the early 2000s, and I found this little historical blurb saying the neighborhood really started growing around the late 1940s. Nothing dramatic, just old enough to have a history, you know? The first time we walked inside, though, it was strange. The layout had all these makeshift partitions, like those office cubicles, like someone tried to turn a home into a mini call center. Dusty corners, that stale, nobody's lived here in a while smell, and the whole place felt like it had been holding its breath. The woman selling it, her name was Maribel, was friendly, super casual. She told us she'd rented it out for years and that a whole bunch of people had lived there before us. She said something like, "Oh, at least 15, maybe more." And she was very insistent about one thing. She had no idea about any spooky stuff. Like, she almost laughed it off. "Ghosts? Here? No, mijo, it's just an old house." That kind of vibe. Now, fast forward. We're using it every day. There are always at least a couple people in there, sometimes 4 or 5, depending on the day. It's not like the place sits empty and creepy. It's active, busy. Lights on, phones ringing, people talking. And yet, almost everyone has had something happen. My uncle, well, not actually my uncle, he's my mom's cousin, but we all call him my uncle. His name's Raul. He stays there sometimes because it's easier with work, and one night he swears someone started pounding on his door like they were angry. Like bam, bam, bam. The kind of knocking that makes your stomach drop. He said there was even a flashlight shining through the window, sweeping back and forth like someone was trying to look inside. Here's the part that makes my skin crawl. We have cameras everywhere. Because early on, like right when we were getting set up, someone broke in. After that, my grandpa, Hector, got really intense about security. He's former military, and once he gets a worry in his head, it's like he turns it into a mission. For a while, he was checking the camera feed multiple times a night, like clockwork. So the next morning, after Raul tells us about the banging and the flashlight, we pull up the footage. And there's nothing. No person, no flashlight, no shadow moving. Just Raul reacting, sitting up fast, staring at the window, getting up to check. But whatever he was responding to, not there. Then there was this other night. This one honestly freaks me out the most. Grandpa Hector is watching the cameras, and he sees these quick bursts of light outside, like little flashes, the way a flashlight looks if someone's turning it or clicking it on and off. He calls Raul right away, like, "Go outside, now." Raul goes out. There's nobody. No car, no footsteps, nothing. But while he's standing out there, Grandpa is still seeing the flashes on the monitor. And then, this bright little orb shows up on camera. I know. Orbs. That word makes people roll their eyes. But I'm telling you what it looked like. It was this small, glowing dot, moving in a way that didn't feel like a bug drifting. It glided, stopped, shifted direction, like it was thinking. And at one point, it went behind the corner of the wall, like fully disappeared behind the wall, and then popped back out again. The next day, we had the camera guys check everything. Lenses were clean, no dust storms inside the housing, and there aren't really moths or anything like that around there. Mostly just ants and the occasional roach. Nobody could give us a satisfying explanation. After that, the stories just kept stacking up. There's a guy who works with Raoul, his name is Damien, and he told us he watched a kitchen cabinet door swing open by itself. Not slowly, not like it was loose. It was fully closed, and that cabinet is heavy. And it was indoors, no breeze, no open windows. Then one of the interns, Santi, this quiet college kid, said a regular door opened in front of him. Like a normal room door, handle and all, just easing open like someone on the other side was leaving the room. Except there was nobody. My mom, Elena, has seen silhouettes more than once. Not like a full body you can describe, just that something passed by the doorway feeling. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. And then she told me what happened this morning, and I swear I got goosebumps. It was around 6-ish, still dim out. She was lying on this fold-out cot we keep there sometimes, and the couch was parked kind of awkwardly in the hallway, like it was temporarily blocking part of the path. She said she felt someone walk past the side of the cot. Not like air moving, like the sensation of footsteps, that subtle vibration, the presence. She assumed it was Raoul, so she didn't even sit up at first. But then she felt it again, and again. And what threw her off was this. It never came back the other way. Like if someone walks past you in a hallway, eventually they pass back, right? Or you hear them go into a room. But she said it was just this repeated feeling of someone walking by her side, and then nothing. No return footsteps, no doors, just that pass-by presence. Then, from a nearby room, she heard banging on a door, like someone knocking from the inside. And right as she's trying to figure out if Raoul is messing around, or if someone's actually in there, she felt something touch her feet. Not a brush from a blanket, not a twitch, a deliberate touch, like fingertips. When she told me that, she got quiet in the way people do when they're trying not to sound dramatic. Like she didn't want to convince herself it happened, but she couldn't pretend it didn't. And the weirdest part? When these things happen, except those 2 orb incidents, the cameras never catch anything. No figure, no door moving by itself, no cabinet swinging, just the person reacting, turning their head, jumping, freezing, staring at something we can't see. Now here's where I feel almost embarrassed, because it makes me sound like I'm trying too hard. I've never experienced it myself. Everyone else has a story. I don't. And I've tried. I've literally tried to bait it. I'll stay late, walk into the darker rooms alone, even put on creepy videos on my phone like, okay, fine, if something's here, show me. And nothing. I get silence. I get regular house noises. I get normal. People keep telling me different things. Some say if it ever happens to me, I should talk back, like knock it off, or even curse at it to show I'm not scared. But they also warn me not to challenge it, not to be like, do it again, or prove you're real, because apparently that's a bad idea. And honestly, if I ever actually see something, like really see it, I don't even think I'd yell. I think I'd just stare. Like my brain would go, okay, there you are, because it's not nothing to them. So yeah, that's our little office house. Always busy, always lit up, and somehow still full of these moments that make people stop mid-sentence and go, did you see that? Even though there's nothing there to point to. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you something that still makes me pause when I think about it, because it was just so strange. To set the scene, the night before, I'd stayed up way too late binge watching a series. Like, full-on all-nighter. And yeah, I know, lack of sleep can make your brain do weird stuff. But here's the thing. I've pulled all-nighters before. Not often, but enough. And I actually felt pretty normal afterward. I even grabbed a couple short naps during the day. That night, I went to bed early on purpose to balance things out. And I was home alone. My bedroom setup is basically a cozy fortress. I had a ridiculous number of blankets piled on me, regular comforter, an extra throw, and my weighted blanket on top. I sleep with two big pillows, and I sort of curl in on myself like I'm trying to become a burrito. I also had my standing fan running because I love the steady noise. It knocks me out fast. Right before I fell asleep, I did my usual routine. Watched a few videos on my phone, plugged it in, set my glasses beside it, clicked off my lamp, and rolled over to face the wall. My bed sits in the corner, so when I turn that way, it's just wall. No distractions. I'm pretty sure I'd been asleep for maybe 30, 40 minutes when something pulled me out of it. It wasn't like a loud bang or anything. It was this sound, and I honestly don't even know how to describe it without sounding ridiculous. It was kind of whispery, but not like words, more like a soft crackle, like someone whispering while snapping tiny bits of twigs, or like faint popping sounds wrapped in breath. So I'm awake, but only halfway. I'm staring at the wall for a second, trying to figure out if I'm dreaming or if something in the room is making that noise. And then my brain catches up and I'm like, wait, what is that? I shove my pillows off. I peel the blankets back. I sit up, ready to get up and look around. And right there, right in front of me, maybe 2 feet away, there's this light. Not a lamp, not a reflection, not a phone screen glow. It was floating in the air. It was this pale, bluish-green swirl, like a little twisting cloud of light, but dim, like a cheap glow stick after it's been on for hours. Bright enough to see clearly, not bright enough to light the room. I just froze and stared at it, because my brain couldn't find the right folder to file it under. And then, like an idiot, I reached my hand out. I didn't feel anything. No heat, no static, no resistance. Nothing. The light didn't react at all. It didn't flicker, didn't move away, didn't pulse. It just hovered there, calmly doing its thing while I sat there trying to figure out how reality suddenly changed the rules. Then I thought, okay, get your glasses, look at it properly. So I pulled my hand back and reached toward my nightstand. And the second my hand moved away, the crackly whisper sound stopped. The bluish-green light vanished like it had never existed. And my standing fan, still plugged in, still standing right there, shut off. Just off. No gradual slowing like it lost power. No wobble. It simply stopped, like someone hit a switch. My first instinct was to tell myself it had been a dream. That would have been the clean explanation. Except I was sitting upright, blankets shoved off, pillows moved, like I'd fully woken up and sat up on purpose. I'm not a sleepwalker. I've never done that sit straight up and start doing things kind of sleep behavior before. And I remember the sequence too clearly. Sound, sit up, light, reach out, glasses, gone. The fan turning off almost bothered me more than the light, honestly. It does have a timer feature, sure, but I never use it, because the little timer indicator is obnoxiously bright, like having a tiny flashlight pointed at you in the dark. And it wasn't on. So I just sat there in the sudden quiet, staring at the spot where that light had been, with my heart thumping like, what just happened in my room? And I'm telling you, it wasn't scary in the monster under the bed way. It was scary in the, I don't have a category for this way. like something impossible happened for a few seconds, and then reality snapped back into place and left me sitting there, wide awake, trying to convince myself I hadn't actually seen what I know I saw. So this happened a little over a decade ago, but I swear to you, it's one of those memories that never really fades, like it's still tucked somewhere in the back of my body, waiting to make my skin prickle. Back then, I was 17 and my buddy Noah was 18. We were inseparable in that we've got all the time in the world kind of way. Most days we'd rotate between skating around town, losing hours to video games, and, yeah, sneaking off to smoke because we were still young enough to be paranoid about our parents catching a whiff on our clothes. There was this patch of woods near our neighborhood that we treated like our little hiding place. It wasn't some deep wilderness or anything. There were actual walking trails, but it had this one spot we loved. Somebody had built these rough, man-made stairs right into the side of a steep dirt hill, like actual steps dug into the incline, and there was a long metal handrail running beside them. It was honestly kind of cool, in a weird, why is this here way. One evening, we're talking early fall I think, because the air had that crisp edge, we decided to head over there. It was around 6:30 when we left, still plenty of daylight. By the time we got to the stair set, the sun was starting to tilt lower, but the woods were still bright enough that you could see everything clearly. We climbed up to the top of the steps and settled in like we always did. Just two dumb teenagers, perched above the trail, passing time and laughing about nothing. We smoked a little, talked a little, and then, without either of us really deciding to, we both got quiet. Not awkward quiet, more like we just drifted into it. And then it happened. This boom. I don't even know how to describe it properly because it wasn't just a sound. It was like the world punched outward for half a second. It hit my ears, but it also hit my chest and the soles of my feet, and this is the part that still makes me uncomfortable. It felt like it came from everywhere at once. Above us, around us, and somehow from under the ground too, like the earth itself had thumped. I just froze, staring ahead, trying to figure out if I was imagining it. After a moment, I turned to Noah and tried to sound casual, like I wasn't suddenly terrified. I was like, "Did you feel that?" He didn't even hesitate. He just looked at me with this expression that said, "Thank God you said it first," and goes, "Yeah, what the hell was that?" And the second he confirmed it, my stomach dropped. Because okay, if it was just me, I could have blamed it on being high. But it wasn't just me. While we're whispering back and forth about it, we don't really notice what's happening around us until it's already too late to ignore. Fog starts rolling in. Not like a light mist, like full-on fog, thick enough that the trees down the slope start fading into gray silhouettes. And it happened weirdly fast, like someone turned a dial. 5 minutes earlier, the place felt normal, and now it felt closed in, smaller, like the forest was holding its breath. Noah tried to shrug it off because that was his thing. He starts fumbling to pack another bowl, acting like it's no big deal, and right as he's about to light it, a scream cuts through the woods, sharp, high, long. It sounded like a woman screaming, but not in a movie way, more raw than that, more real. It echoed between the trees, and both of us just locked up instantly. I remember the hairs on my arms lifting like they had minds of their own. Then it happened again. Louder this time, closer, or at least it felt closer, like it was aimed right at us. And then a third scream, even more distinct, that sort of trailed off at the end, like whoever or whatever made it ran out of air. After that, silence. Heavy silence.
Noah didn't smoke again after that.
He didn't even finish packing it. We just looked at each other, and without saying anything dramatic, we did that mutual, immediate agreement thing. Like, we're leaving. Now. We packed up with those shaky, clumsy movements you get when you're trying to hurry but your hands don't feel like they belong to you. Then we half walked, half jogged down the trail toward the edge of the woods. The whole time I kept expecting something else. Another scream, footsteps, anything. But there was nothing. Just fog and our breathing and the sound of our shoes scraping dirt. Here's the part that really messed with me though. We got out of the forest, maybe 15 minutes tops, and the fog was gone. Just gone. The air outside was totally clear. Streetlights were coming on, cars passing, normal life. It was like we stepped out of a different world. We tried to laugh it off afterward because that's what you do when you don't want to admit you're scared. We called it a weird night, made a couple jokes, and then slowly stopped talking about it altogether. Life happened. Noah and I drifted the way people drift when school ends and schedules change, and you start becoming different versions of yourself. We didn't really talk for years. And then, years later, I ran into him again, at his wedding of all places. Same guy, just older, cleaner cut, smiling like an adult. At some point during the reception, we ended up off to the side talking, and it hit me. I brought it up like, "Hey, do you remember that night in the woods? The stairs? The fog?" And immediately his face changed. Not scared exactly, just serious. Like a door opened in his memory. He remembered all of it. The stair set, the fog, the screams, and most of all, that boom. We kind of laughed about it because we were in wedding clothes with music playing nearby, and it felt ridiculous to be talking about something that creepy in that setting. But I'll be honest with you, I still got chills. Because even after all those years, his memory matched mine so closely, it was like we'd left that night paused somewhere, waiting for us to come back and press play. People ask me what I think it was. I don't know. The screams were terrifying, sure, but what I can't shake, what I don't think I'll ever shake, is that first moment. That deep, impossible, all directions boom that felt like it came from the sky and the ground at the same time. Like the forest itself was warning us, or announcing something, and we just happened to be sitting there to hear it. You know that split-second feeling when you're sure someone is standing right behind you? So sure, your body reacts before your mind can catch up? That's what it's like for me. Except it isn't just a quick jolt. It comes as this heavy, unmistakable dread, like a cold breath on the back of my neck, like the air in the room changes shape. I'll turn around, fast, because everything in me says someone's there, and every time, there's nothing, just empty space and that horrible quiet. And then the second part hits, this wave of sadness so raw it almost doesn't feel like mine, like I'm being flooded with grief without any actual memories attached to it. It's emotion without context, no clear thought, no reason, just this deep ache that fills my chest and makes me feel hollow at the same time. The strangest thing is how it leaves. Usually within half an hour, give or take, it fades like it never happened. No gradual come down, just gone. And I am left sitting there, trying to convince myself it was nothing. People have told me it's anxiety, paranoia, stress, whatever label makes it fit into something tidy. I've tried to accept that. I really have. But I've had this since I was little. And over the years, there have been other things. Small, bizarre moments that don't quite sit right if you replay them too carefully. Like a toy suddenly chirping a tune when it shouldn't even be able to turn on. Or something on a table nudging toward me when there's no slope, no vibration, No obvious reason. Once, years ago, my partner, Lena, swore she saw a man standing in our kitchen. She was outside, looking in through the window while I was upstairs, and she called my name like someone had broken in. I remember stepping into the hallway, dripping wet from the shower, confused and annoyed, and by the time I got down there, the room was empty. There was another incident that still feels almost embarrassing to say out loud, because it sounds like I'm trying to write a horror story. A framed picture of my mum, one of those canvas prints, had been moved from the lounge into the entryway. Nothing dramatic, just a different spot. And then, later, without warning, it slid and tipped and just launched itself off the surface like it had been swatted. It didn't just fall, it moved, like it had somewhere to be. I don't even like telling people this stuff, because here's the thing. I'm not someone who goes looking for ghosts. I'm not the kind of person who wants the world to be full of paranormal explanations. If anything, I've spent years trying to make myself more practical, more grounded, more normal. Most days, I can push it all to the back of my mind and get on with life. But then there are the other moments, the ones I can't neatly box up. A few times, I've seen people who I knew were gone. Not like glowing shapes or floating lights, nothing theatrical. Just a person, there for a second, like you've looked up at exactly the wrong time. Once, I was visiting a friend, Aaron, and in the corner of his living room, for a heartbeat, I saw an older woman standing there like she belonged to the house. I described her afterward without thinking much of it. Her hair, her posture, even the way she held her hands. Aaron went pale. He showed me a photo later. It was his grandmother. I'd never met her. I'd never even seen a picture of her before that day. So when this dread comes, this specific dread, I recognize it immediately. Not because I want to, because my body does. Same sensation, same breath on the shoulder certainty, same crushing, nameless grief. And the awful part is, it never comes with information. It's not a warning with details. It's not some helpful message or vision that lets me prevent anything or prepare. It's just the feeling. And then later, hours or days after, the phone rings, or someone texts, or there's a conversation that starts with, "Are you sitting down?" It's happened with my grandparents. It happened before my mother-in-law passed. It's happened enough times that I can't pretend it's random anymore, not in my bones. Every time, it's exactly the same. So distinct it doesn't resemble any normal worry I've ever felt. So now I'm left here with that familiar, sick calm that comes after the wave has passed, thinking the thought I hate thinking. Someone in my family is probably gone. And all I can do is wait to find out who. I always do the same thing, too. This small, private plea I feel ashamed of even as I'm making it. I hope it isn't my parents. I hope it isn't one of the people I can't imagine losing. And even saying that feels selfish, because if it isn't my parents, it will be someone else's. Someone else will be getting the call. Someone else will be stepping into that empty, changed world where a person used to be. But I'm just being honest with you. That's what I do. I sit with it, and I wait, and I try to act normal while my stomach knots itself into something tight and quiet. And I hate that I've learned the shape of this feeling so well. Because no matter how rational I try to be, no matter how much I tell myself it's just nerves, when that dread breathes down my neck, it has never been wrong. Okay, so I should probably start by admitting something. I've been obsessed with paranormal stories for as long as I can remember, but I've always hovered right on the edge of actually believing them. Like, I want the world to be a little stranger and more interesting. And honestly, when you've heard thousands of people swear they've seen or heard something unexplainable, it's hard not to think some of it has to be real. But I'm still a skeptic. I'm the kind of person who will bend over backwards trying to find the boring explanation first. When I was around 11, my grandfather died. And to be totally blunt, it wasn't the kind of death that left me shattered. He wasn't some sweet old man who told stories and slipped you candy when your parents weren't looking. He was cruel, a heavy drinker, loud, unpredictable, and the type of person who made a house feel smaller just by being inside it. He and my grandmother lived in this old wooden house out in a village, one of those places where everything creaks and smells like dust and summer heat. I used to go there with my mom for part of the summer, usually a month or two. Even though I wasn't there all the time, I still carried enough memories out of that place to last me years. And here's where it gets weird. After he died, my grandmother, let's call her Nadia, would tell us she heard knocking. Not like polite little tap-tap sounds, more like sharp, forceful cracks, like something was hitting the walls or furniture with purpose. She said it would happen all through the house, like it couldn't decide where it wanted to be. And when I stayed there, I heard it too. Mostly at night. I can still remember lying in bed, staring into the dark, trying to keep my breathing quiet, when suddenly there'd be this loud crack somewhere near the dresser. Then maybe an hour later, another one closer to the kitchen. Sometimes it sounded like it came right from the wall beside my head, like the house itself had snapped at me. Once, I swear to you, it came from a chair right next to the bed. So close I actually sat up and looked at it, like I expected to see it rocking or moved out of place. But I didn't. And I wanted to believe it was something paranormal, while also being determined not to. So I came up with the most reasonable explanation I could. Old house, old wood, temperature changes. The place had been built sometime in the late 70s or early 80s, and wooden houses do make noises. They settle, they expand, they complain. So I told myself, that's all it is. Then there was the kitchen, and that's the part that still makes my stomach tighten, even now. At night, I would hear dishes clinking. Not just a single sound, like a plate shifting a little. I mean actual busy noise, like someone was in there doing something, sliding a cup aside, moving a plate, setting something down. It had that human activity rhythm to it, like a person trying to be quiet but still making tiny mistakes. It happened constantly, night after night. And the thing is, I kept thinking it must be my mom, let's call her Elena, or my grandmother getting up for water. Maybe someone checking the sink. There was even this annoying dripping faucet that didn't help my nerves at all. Drip, drip. And then the soft clatter of glass and ceramic like someone was right there. Except, looking back, none of my explanations hold up. Because I never heard footsteps. Not once. The floors creaked like crazy, so if someone walked to the kitchen, I would have heard it. And Elena hated the dark. If she went into the kitchen at night, she would have turned a light on immediately. But the house stayed pitch black. So why did it sound like someone was carefully moving dishes around in the darkness? I didn't realize how wrong I was until recently, when the memory hit me out of nowhere, and I just sat there thinking, wait, I've lived in other apartments, I've stayed in other houses, I've moved around, and I have never heard anything like that anywhere else. And what's more, when I visited the village house in the past few years, nothing. No dish sounds, no nighttime kitchen activity, just quiet. That realization messed with me more than I expected, because back then, it terrified me. Deep down it did, but I kept forcing myself into calmness. I kept telling myself, no, it's fine. This is normal. It's just wood. It's just the house. And now, realizing it wasn't normal at all, it feels like my younger self was right to be scared. Of course, my brain still tries to salvage a rational explanation. The outside of the house was renovated years ago. New siding, repairs, that kind of thing. Maybe it changed how the structure settled. Maybe it reduced vibrations. Maybe something in the kitchen cabinets was loose back then and got fixed without anyone thinking it mattered. It's possible. But still. A few nights ago, I had the chance to stay there again, and I was almost testing it. Like I wanted to see if I'd just exaggerated the memories, or if my mind had stitched together details that weren't real. I'm a night owl. I barely sleep, so if anything was going to happen, I'd hear it. And it was completely quiet. No knocks, no kitchen clatter. Nothing. The only sounds were normal ones, the sort that don't make your skin prickle. The house felt calm, safe even. And that's what makes the whole thing stranger, because the house used to live in my nightmares. When I was a teenager, I dreamt about that place constantly. In those dreams, I was always running, being chased by something huge and wrong, ducking into corners, hiding behind doors, praying it wouldn't find me. And it's hard not to notice that my subconscious kept choosing that specific house, again and again, like it had been branded into me. I also had dreams about my grandfather himself. Let's call him Victor. In the dreams, he would come back. Not alive. Not really. More like a dead thing trying to pass as human. Close enough to fool everyone else, but not close enough to fool me. The uncanny feeling was overwhelming. Like his face was wearing the idea of life, but the actual life wasn't there. And the worst part was how everyone acted like it was normal. Elena, Nadia, other relatives. They'd talk to him like, "Oh, you're back, okay," as if nothing about it was horrifying. Meanwhile, I'd be standing there feeling insane, like I was the only person who remembered the most basic rule of reality. The dead don't come back. In those dreams, I'd try to hint at it, try to get someone to notice, but I could never quite say it out loud, because I always had this certainty that if Victor realized I knew, I'd be in danger, like he'd turn that attention on me. The last time I had one of those dreams, it got wildly cinematic. There were other people, like a team, and they gave me this strange sword, something that felt ancient and important, and somehow I fought him off. I don't even remember the exact ending. I just know I stopped having those nightmares after that. So yeah, could all of it be explainable? Probably. Old house, old pipes, old cabinets, grief, stress, childhood fear, imagination. But I can't shake the feeling that for a while, something lingered there. Something angry, restless, familiar in the worst way. And honestly, it wouldn't shock me if it was him. If Victor spent his life making everyone miserable, why wouldn't he try to haunt the place a little after? Still, whatever it was, it's gone now. There's no heaviness there anymore, no dread. If anything, it feels peaceful, like the air has finally been cleared out. I go there now and feel like I can breathe, like I can reclaim it, which almost makes me smile in a quiet way. Like, whatever haunted that house, whether it was something paranormal or just old pain, it doesn't get to own it anymore. I do. So, I need you to imagine this with me, because even now, it feels like the kind of thing your brain tries to sand down into something more reasonable. This happened in late May, a few years back, when I went with my family to a little cabin by a lake for my cousin Rafa's birthday. The place actually belonged to my brother's wife's family, my sister-in-law, Camila, so it had that lived-in, Loved by generations kind of feel. Wooden deck, calm water, thick trees crowding in close like they were guarding the whole property. And just to set the scene properly, this was in Brazil, but not in the region where I grew up. It took us about 6 hours to get there by car, the kind of drive that leaves you stiff and cranky until you step out and the air hits you. Clean, damp, full of leaf smell, and suddenly you remember your body is part of nature too. That Saturday, I basically devoted my entire day to my little niece, Leah, who was 4 at the time. She was in that stage where everything is a discovery, and every discovery is urgent. We swam in the lake, ran around the pool, and did that kid thing where you flip rocks to see what creepy little universe is living underneath. She was thrilled. I was exhausted in the best way. That night, everyone ate together, and then the adults stayed up doing the usual, talking too loudly, laughing, singing bits of songs nobody fully remembers. But I'm an early sleeper, always have been, so I crashed first. I remember thinking, as I fell asleep, that I'd had one of those rare days that feels clean, like a reset. I'd planned to wake up around 5 a.m. to make coffee and catch the sunrise from the deck, the one that jutted out over the water. But instead I woke up closer to 4:15, and it wasn't the gentle kind of waking. It was the kind where your eyes snap open and you immediately know you were just somewhere else. I'd been having these strange dreams, fragmented, slippery, where you can't recall the story, only the feeling. And when I sat up in bed, there was one single thing left in my mind, like someone had pressed a stamp into wet clay. Matinta Pereira. I actually whispered it out loud, just the name. Now here's the odd part. I wasn't raised with that story. It wasn't one of the big folklore creatures people talked about where I'm from. I'd heard the name once in passing, maybe in a song, maybe a casual mention, but I couldn't have told you what it was. I didn't even know if I was pronouncing it right, so I just sat there thinking, why is my brain serving me that at 4 in the morning? I shook it off, tried to be normal, and went to make coffee. While I was in the kitchen, I heard Leah start crying from the bedroom she was sharing with her parents. It wasn't a full meltdown, more like startled sobbing, like she'd been yanked out of sleep. My first instinct was to run in, but I heard her mom murmuring, soothing her. The crying faded. The house settled again. So I took my mug and headed out to the deck, and it was perfect out there. The sky still had stars. The lake was dark but alive. Soft water sounds against the posts, little splashes from fish, frogs calling, some distant night birds doing their lonely, echoey calls. You know that feeling when you're completely still and the world keeps moving around you? That. I should tell you something about me, because it matters. I studied biology, zoology specifically, so even though I don't work in that field anymore, my brain still categorizes the natural world like it's breathing. In college, I used to spend weekends birdwatching with friends, identifying species by silhouette and call. I'm not saying I'm some kind of expert on every animal in Brazil, but I know the difference between normal and what the hell is that? So I'm sitting there, sipping coffee, letting the night drain into morning, and then everything goes silent. Not quieter, not the frogs paused. Silent, like someone hit mute on the world. And in that silence, I felt it, this sudden, sharp sense that I wasn't alone, that I was being watched, and not in a casual way, in a way that made my stomach drop, like my body recognized danger before my mind could explain it. For a few seconds, I honestly wondered if I'd slipped back into a dream, like maybe I was still asleep and just thought I was sitting out there, because nature doesn't do that. Not like that. I didn't want to turn around. That's the strangest part. Some instinct was begging me not to move, but I forced myself, slowly, to look back toward the cabin, because if someone else was awake, if it was a person, then at least my fear could land somewhere sensible. At first, I saw nothing, just the cabin shape, the darker squares of windows, a hint of light from the moon. Then I glanced up, and there, on the edge of the roof, was something that made my brain short-circuit. It looked like a bird, but it was too big. Not big bird big, not wow, that's a large owl big. Person-sized. The moonlight hit it in this slick, almost oily way, reflecting off feathers so black they looked like they swallowed light. I couldn't make out a face. I couldn't see a beak. It was like the head was hidden, like it wore a kind of hood, a veil of darkness, and all I could see was the outline. The body was thin, almost hunched. The wings were folded, but wrong. Too long. Too heavy. Like they belonged to something that wasn't supposed to be sitting calmly on a roof. And the whole time I'm staring, my mind is doing that frantic zoology inventory. Harpy eagle? No. Owl? No. Vulture? No. Nothing fit. Nothing even came close. I wanted to scream. I wanted to bolt back inside, but I couldn't move. I was locked in place, mug in my hands, watching this impossible thing like my body had decided movement would make it notice me. Then it shifted. Not dramatically, almost casually, like it was adjusting itself, preparing. And suddenly it opened its wings fully. I swear to you, the span looked absurd, like it shouldn't have been able to lift off at all. It launched from the roof in a single, smooth motion and flew off to the right, toward the woods. And the second it disappeared into the tree line, the world snapped back to life. Frogs started calling again. Water resumed its gentle slap against the wood. A bird called from somewhere far off like it had never stopped. Even the air felt normal again, like someone had released a pressure valve. But I didn't feel normal. I started shaking so hard I thought I might drop the mug, and then I just broke. I started crying, quietly at first, then in these awful, gasping waves. Not because I was being dramatic, because it felt like my mind couldn't hold what had just happened. Like reality had bent and then straightened out again, and I was still stuck in the bend. I didn't tell anyone that morning, or the next, or for a long time. Because what do you even say? Later, days later, I couldn't stand it anymore, and I looked up the name that had been left behind in my head like a splinter. Matinta Pereira. And reading about it made my skin go cold. Because the stories talked about a large black bird, something that appears around homes, something tied to uneasy bargains and disturbances, something that shows up like a warning, or like a collector. I don't know what it was doing there. I don't know if it was even for us. Maybe it was passing through. Maybe my sleep-starved brain stitched folklore onto a shadow and called it truth. All I know is this. That night, that exact night, Leah started having night terrors. And whether that's coincidence or not, I can't make myself shrug it off. Even now, if I wake up too early and the house is too quiet, I catch myself listening for the frogs, listening for the water. Okay, so I need to tell you about last night, because I still get that weird, cold feeling in my chest when I replay it. So I'm Maya, and my friend Tessa had just gotten back from a trip. She'd brought home these wild, novelty alcohol bottles, like the kind with goofy dessert cereal flavors, and she wanted me and our other friend Kylie to come over, hang out, and help her taste test, or at least smell them, and laugh about it. I got to Tessa's place first, a little after 8:15 p.m. It's important to know her house is way out, basically tucked into the woods. Like, no neighbors close by woods. And outside? Pitch black. One lonely streetlight down the road, and it's usually off by that time, so it's just darkness and trees. Tessa tells me pretty early on, "Hey, it's just us tonight. My husband's out of town visiting family with his brother." Which is fine, but it did make the house feel a little quieter than usual. We're in her kitchen, and she starts pulling out these bottles like it's show and tell. One smells like watermelon candy, one like sour gummy worms, and another one, swear to you, smelled like some kind of sweet cereal milk. We're cracking up, taking turns sniffing them like we're professional judges or something. Kylie was supposed to already be there, but she wasn't. So I text her like, "Where are you?" And she replies that something came up at home, but she's on her way. We keep chatting, and then, this is where everything shifts. We hear someone outside go, "Hi," like really clear, a woman's voice, and it sounded exactly like Kylie. Tessa and I stop mid-sentence and just stare at each other. And I'm like, "Oh, that must be Kylie." So I walk to the front door, and because it's so dark outside, I flick on my phone flashlight as I open it. I lean out and I call, "Hey, we're over here." Nothing. So I call again, louder, "Kylie, where are you?" Still nothing. And I even yell a nickname I call her, like full volume, embarrassing yelling, because I'm thinking maybe she can't see the porch or she's walking up from the driveway. But there's no answer, no footsteps, no car door, no crunch of gravel, nothing. Tessa's dogs outside start barking, which makes it even harder to hear, but also, it makes the whole thing feel sharper, like the dogs are reacting to something I'm not seeing. I step back inside and look at Tessa like, "Did you hear that too?" And she's pale, and she just goes, "Shut the door." I shut it, and she goes, "No, lock it." So I lock it, and now we're both standing there in the entryway, staring at the door like it's about to open on its own. I text Kylie, "Are you here?" And she texts back, "No." I swear I felt my stomach drop. I immediately message her again like, "Bro, I heard your voice outside. Are you serious right now?" And she calls me instantly, totally freaked out like, "Are you messing with me?" And I'm like, "No, I'm dead serious. Are you here?" And I can hear her tires on the road through the phone. Like, you know when someone's driving and you can hear that soft roar in the background? She was definitely still in the car. So now it's not just, we heard something. It's, we heard someone. And it's not the person we thought it was. Tessa starts texting a family friend, Marcus, to come over, because we're both officially past spooked and into something is wrong. So I'm on the phone with Kylie, Tessa's texting Marcus, and that's when we hear noises in the back of the house. Like, inside, not outside anymore. It starts soft, like the house settling. Old houses pop and creak, whatever. But then it gets faster, heavier, like something shifting around in Tessa's bedroom area, like a drawer being yanked or someone stepping wrong on a floorboard. It had rhythm to it, intent. Tessa and I just look toward the hallway at the same time. She raises the shotgun and I raise my phone flashlight like that's going to save us. We move down the hallway, Tessa in front, me right behind her. We sweep the room with our lights. Nothing. No open windows. No person. No animal. No explanation. Just the air feeling thick, like we interrupted something we weren't invited to. Around this time, my boyfriend calls, and I answer for like 2 seconds, just long enough to say, "Something's happening, I'll call you back." Because my brain is doing that thing where it's trying to be normal while everything is absolutely not normal. And then Kylie calls me again and says, "I'm outside." And immediately I'm like, "Do not get out of the car. Stay in it. We don't know what's going on." So she stays put. Her headlights are on, but it's still so dark that it feels like the woods are swallowing the light. Marcus shows up a few minutes later, but he accidentally blocks the cars in when he pulls up. Doesn't matter. At least we're not alone anymore. I ask Kylie to turn on her brights so we can actually see more than 10 feet past the driveway, and she does. The trees beyond the light just look like a wall. Marcus takes the shotgun from Tessa while she explains everything, and she's moving fast, grabbing a bag, shoving stuff inside, because she's decided she's not staying there that night. She's like, "I'm going to family's. I'm not sleeping here." And I don't blame her, not even a little. I walk out to Kylie's car, but I feel way too exposed standing out there, so I tell her, I'm going to talk to you from inside my car, so I'm enclosed. So I get into my car, roll the window down, and we're talking through the gap between our cars like it's some weird drive-through confession booth. And then I hear it. Behind us. It sounds like a rock being kicked, like a foot scuffing gravel, close enough that my shoulders instantly tense up. I go, "Roll your window up, right now. I heard something behind us." And she rolls it up immediately, and we both just stare forward, watching Tessa and Marcus circle the property with flashlights, checking the dogs, checking the corners of the house, shining light into the tree line. A few minutes pass. We crack the windows again, just barely. Kylie goes, super quietly, "Do you hear that?" I'm watching Tessa and Marcus, scanning, and I'm like, "No, what?" She says the bushes sound like they're rustling, but I can't hear it from my side. And the thing is, Marcus had just walked back there. Like, if it was an animal, it should have bolted. And if it didn't bolt, Marcus would have seen it. Then Kylie looks at me and goes, "It sounds like something is going, ah, 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 ah." And I'm like, "Are you sure it's not one of the dogs?" And she asks, "Do they have a deep bark?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So we try to convince ourselves that's what it is. We need it to be that. Marcus comes back and says he hasn't seen anything, but he wants to fire the shotgun once, just to clear it and scare off anything nearby. So the whole time we thought we had protection, we didn't. And the part that I can't let go of? That first voice. Because Kylie has only been to Tessa's house one time, and whatever called out from the dark sounded like her anyway. And I grew up with Kylie. I know her voice. It wasn't similar. It was right. After we finally got everyone out of there and home safe, we were texting in our group chat, trying to make sense of it. Tessa said something that stuck with me. She said she feels this anger in the house sometimes, like a heavy, sharp feeling. But when she leaves the property, it fades. And I'm not going to pretend I'm some expert, but I know enough to understand that when a place holds a specific, intense emotion like that, especially when it's consistent, it's not a great sign. She wants her pastor to come pray, and she asked me to help cleanse the house too. And honestly, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was something paranormal, or someone messing with us, or some bizarre echo in the woods that just happened to hit the exact right tone. But I do know this. Something answered us from the dark, and it knew exactly whose voice to use.